Chapter 61, The City Watch of King's Landing. The sky was just beginning to lighten. Within the barracks, 400 or 500 pairs of living eyes remained, all trembling as they gazed upon the terrifying lava warrior. The monster, clad in crimson, invincible armor, unleashed a torrent of fire, creating a landscape of charred corpses. The pungent odor was overwhelming, almost unbearable, and no one dared to resist any longer. The hound wiped a smear of blood from his face. Listen up. Former Master of Coin, Peter Baelish, and former Master of Whisperers, Varys, are plotting treason. By order of His Majesty the King, the City Watch of King's Landing will immediately apprehend these traitors, sealing the city gates. Any resistance is to be met with lethal force. I am in command. Anyone object? The hound grinned savagely, as if anticipating tearing apart more humans and savoring their fresh flesh. Silence. Good. If you'd obeyed from the start, none of this would have happened. A bunch of fools, forgetting who gave you these gold cloaks. The hound began relaying Prince Joffrey's orders. Reorganize into 50 squads, each with 8 men. You'll choose the squad leaders, understood, Grey Rat? The man beside the hound nodded silently, then walked into the crowd to select familiar faces. The hound paced back and forth. 5 squads will be stationed at each of the 7 city gates, allowing neither entry nor exit. And you yourselves are not to move an inch. Forget about dukes, earls, ministers, or wealthy merchants. Even if you see your wife being gang-raped by beggars in some corner, you'll damn well wait until tomorrow. The gold cloaks exchanged uneasy glances. The other 15 squads will come with me to your headquarters. There are plenty of traitors there. Remember, they are no longer your comrades. The hound chuckled again, the burn scars on his left cheek widening into crimson fissures. The remaining few dozen will stay here on standby, searching the corpses and buildings. If even one rat slips out of the barracks. The hound didn't finish the sentence, leaving the gold cloaks with plenty of room for imagination. Grey Rat had already chosen the 50 squad leaders. The hound held out a hand. I'll count to 5. Form up by squads. 5, 4. The gold cloaks' hearts pounded involuntarily. They frantically pushed aside their neighbors, scrambling to find their positions, the crowd instantly descending into chaos. 2. Some of the men were completely bewildered. Others, fearing implication, dragged the cowards directly into the ranks. 1. Not bad. Grey Rat, personally cut a lock of hair from everyone and bring it to me. If they're bald, other hair will do. Grey Rat was confused, but he could only obey. Taking the hair used as a locator, the hound nodded in satisfaction and slowly walked to the far left of the neatly arranged 50 squads. He patted each squad leader on the shoulder. You 5 squads go to Dragon Gate, you're in charge. You 5 squads go to Iron Gate, you lead. 7 squad leaders were appointed as temporary commanders, their hearts filled with conflicting emotions. Was this a good thing? Was it a bad thing? Do your jobs well. Don't worry, I'll remember your faces. The hound's gaze swept over the entire group. Far more than 7 officers felt their hearts stop and cold sweat break out. Move out immediately. I'll count to 10, and you'd better be completely out of my sight. 10, 9. The gold cloaks moved out with a speed they had never shown before, like a well-trained elite army. Watching the 35 squads march out of the gate, the hound turned to the 15 squads staring expectantly at him. What are you waiting for? Get your horses, and let's go. Your former commander, Janos Slint, is also a traitor. Kill him. Although most of the gold cloaks were infantry, there were still over 100 horses in the stables, as the hound had known all along. The sky gradually brightened. The entire city was awakening, and the noise created by the gold cloaks accelerated the process. The broad street of the Silent Sisters had originally only a few scattered pedestrians, but the chaotic sound of hooves and angry shouts reverberated through the streets, instantly awakening countless dreamers along the way. Pedestrians frantically hid in alleys and street corners. Many windows opened, and faces peered out. They saw an ominous sight. Hundreds of cavalrymen galloped wildly, each clad in armor and wielding weapons. Some were covered in glaring blood and traces of burning flames. The leading knight wore an exquisite, cold hound helm. Some recognized it. The Hound. The Hound led his team straight to the central square, then turned northwest toward Cobbler's Square, near the headquarters of the City Watch of King's Landing, which would become the biggest battlefield today. The Gold Cloak's headquarters was now both quiet and strange. The snores coming from the various rooms were noticeably fewer than usual. The reason was simple. Some knew that action would be taken today, some knew that action would be taken recently. Some knew that someone might take action today, some knew that they were in danger recently. Some keenly sensed the strange atmosphere. In any case, they all knew that they were deeply mired in a vortex. How could they sleep soundly? The Mudgate captain, Iron Hand Jocelyn Bywater, was one of them, and a particularly special one at that, a double agent, no, a triple agent. He came from a minor branch of the Bywater family, of low status. He was knighted by the king for his service in quelling Balong Greyjoy's rebellion, for which he also lost his right hand, earning him the nickname Iron Hand. He had been the Mudgate captain for 3 years. No one said he was dishonorable or unbrave, but no one knew that he had a relationship with the infamous master of whisperers, Varys. And recently, people from both the Lannisters and the Master of Coin had come to him, and he had become one of theirs as well. A veritable triple agent. Because of this identity, he should be one of the few who knew the most detailed and comprehensive information about what was about to happen. The Lannisters wanted to launch a coup while King Robert was away from King's Landing, promoting the Crown Prince to the throne. The 2 loyal ministers were forced to fight back, quell the Lannister conspiracy, and report the good news to the king. This was the script written by the 2 ministers. But was this the truth? Would it become the truth? Iron Hand doubted it. Which side should I choose? He stared blankly at the dim ceiling, until a noisy sound came from the camp gate, becoming louder and clearer. Iron Hand immediately grabbed the sword by the bed and stood guard inside the door. He heard wooden doors being kicked open, chaotic footsteps from left to right, from right to left, the clanging of swords, excited shouts, painful howls. Before long, the sizzling sound of roasting meat and desperate screams of humans suddenly rang out outside. Iron Hand shuddered. What was that sound? But this was only a brief prelude. The roar of flames soon drowned out all other sounds. So hot! He immediately took a few steps back, away from the walls and the burning fire outside the door. Bang! His door was kicked open, and in the dazzling red armor was a familiar face. Iron Hand threw aside his long sword and knelt on one knee. Lord Sandor, I, Jocelyn Bywater, captain of the Mudgate, am ready to serve you and his highness at any time. The Hound glanced at him. You're wrong. You serve his majesty. Iron Hand sincerely changed his words. Yes, yes, I'm too nervous. Of course, it's his majesty's will. Long live his majesty. The Hound helped him up. It's too chaotic here. You can identify the traitors for me. Iron Hand breathed a sigh of relief. The Hound was about to continue clearing up the trouble, but at this moment, the prince's instructions came to his mind. The gold cloaks sent to Mudgate are killing each other. The rebellious side has a dozen mercenaries helping them. Stop them. The Hound took out the hair of the gold cloaks and used magic to sense them. Their positions were all normal. The people sent to Mudgate were already approaching Fisherman's Square. But not running away didn't mean there were no other situations. This was a bit troublesome. The Hound was quite surprised. What benefits did the Spider and Littlefinger give them to dare to cause trouble again? Mudgate needed people, but the Red Keep needed people even more. He couldn't split himself in two. Then, the Hound couldn't help but look at Iron Hand, who had just stood up. It's you. Now that you've seen it here, please cast your votes. Chapter 62, Change in the Red Keep. The time was just early morning. The throne room of the Red Keep was already filled with guards. 100 or 2 guards wore the crowned stag sigil on their armor or cloaks, and more than 100 others wore the Lannister style of dark red armor. Varys and Peter exchanged a glance, both understanding that the time had come. Clack, clack, clack. 2 long lines of gold cloaks marched past them, armor polished, heading towards the throne room. This was a garrison stationed at the Red Keep, about 300 men, of whom the small council usually only mobilized a third at most, but today they had all arrived. Leading the group was Janos Slint, commander of the city watch of King's Landing. This low-born commander was short and stout, his greed far greater than his barrel-shaped belly, but he also knew how to be loyal to the king. Haha, Lord Peter, Lord Varys, rest assured, my lads are more than enough to guarantee safety. When His Majesty returns, he will surely see an unscathed Red Keep. The commander patted his chest in assurance. Littlefinger chuckled. Lord Varys, shall we go in together? Varys sighed. I really don't know what important matter requires announcing at this hour. To keep His Majesty's Red Keep running smoothly, I was up very late last night. Who knows? Littlefinger agreed. Indeed, they were both puzzled. Investigating the councillor's intelligence, bribing or assassinating the gold cloaks in the city, and launching an attack at the small council almost simultaneously, the manpower in the Red Keep and the city could also suppress any resistance afterward. The plan seemed very feasible, at least taking them down was no problem. But what made them think they wouldn't notice? Once this plan was leaked in advance, could a mere handmaiden and a lone hound really defeat two small council members with deep roots? Not even with the Lannisters. But the fact was that they had indeed discovered it, and had made strong preparations for a counterattack. The situation was excellent. The slight doubts and unease were just instinctive reactions, and could be ignored. So Varys and Petyr deferred to each other, and finally confidently stepped through the doors of the throne room. Inside the hall stood all the courtiers and ladies of the Red Keep. Beneath the sharp iron throne stood the familiar council table, where Grand Maester Pycelle and Master of Laws Renley sat, with no empty seats. Beside the throne stood the Master of the Red Keep, the 4 King's Guard, and the handmaiden Hannah. Petyr scanned the room. You lords are truly diligent. Lord Varys and I are actually the last to arrive. Has the meeting already begun? The Grand Maester coughed. Please forgive us, my lords, but the steward of the Crown Prince, Miss Hannah, said that there was a secret edict from His Majesty that urgently needs to be announced in public, so. Varys understood their intention. A secret edict? What an old and cliché method, but unfortunately, it often works. Hannah walked to the council table and presented a sealed scroll, the round wax seal bearing the imprint of the King's royal seal. May I trouble you all to pass this around one by one, to check whether His Majesty's secret edict is sealed intact, and whether the royal seal is genuine. Afterward, please have the Grand Maester read it aloud. Hannah had obtained this secret edict from the Hound, and it came in handy today. She first handed it to Grand Maester Pycelle. The Grand Maester examined it carefully for a long time, nodding silently, and passed the secret edict to Renley. I trust the Grand Maester's judgment. Renley glanced at Hannah with a smile that wasn't a smile, and directly passed the secret edict to the courtier next to him. One after another, the secret edict finally reached Varys and Littlefinger, who were standing in the center of the hall. Varys caressed the scroll with his smooth palm, repeatedly praising, exquisitely made. Especially the crowned stag on the wax, majestic and strong, with clear lines. What questions could I have? He handed it to Littlefinger. Littlefinger respectfully took it, gave Renley and the commander of the city watch a meaningful look, and strode forward to return it to Pycelle, then retreated to the center of the hall. It seems there was some miscalculation in today's arrangement, so Lord Varys and I will just have to make do and stand here to listen to the edict. The atmosphere in the throne room immediately became extremely delicate. The courtiers and nobles were already deeply suspicious of today's unusual summons, and now that they had witnessed such a scene with their own eyes, even the most obtuse person knew that something major was about to happen. Pycelle opened the scroll and cleared his throat. The throne room immediately fell silent, hundreds of eyes all turning to the aged Grand Maester. Far away in the neck, Joffrey was also watching intently. In less than a breath's time, the Grand Maester widened his eyes, his long white beard trembling violently. Everyone held their breath. What was it? After muttering vaguely for a while, the Grand Maester finally began to recite resolutely. The following is the decree of Robert I of House Baratheon, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm. I hereby declare that Petyr Baelish of House Baelish, Master of Coin, and Varys, Master of Whisperers, are guilty of treason. The hall erupted in an uproar. Sear Marintrant of the King's Guard beside the throne immediately shouted, "Silence!" Only then did the people abruptly quiet down, all looking at the two ministers being judged in the center, but seeing two indifferent faces. Colluding with the foreign enemy Bloodraven Brynden Rivers, illegally amassing wealth, corrupting courtiers and officers, abusing power, plotting to harm the kingdom, murdering the former hand of the king, Lord of the Eyrie and Warden of the East, Jon Arryn of House Arryn, and murdering my brother, the former Lord of Dragonstone, Master of Ships, Stannis Baratheon of House Baratheon. Their crimes are unforgivable. Imprison the two immediately to await my personal trial and disposal. Gods be good, to show mercy and compassion, I pardon the crimes of all those under them, who shall remain in their respective positions. However, anyone who opposes or pleads for them shall be considered guilty of the same crime. Let the small council execute this, supervised by Hannah, steward of my son Joffrey, and Sandor Clegane, guard." The hall was silent. Lannister guards, Baratheon guards, and gold cloaks all involuntarily gripped their sword hilts and spear shafts tightly. Littlefinger looked at Renley. "Lord Renley, we have been small council members together for so many years, don't you understand my character?" Someone must have been twisting tongues to cause His Majesty to misunderstand. Varys collapsed to the ground with a sob. "There must be a mistake, I want to see His Majesty, I am loyal to His Majesty has always known." The courtiers remained silent. Hannah urged, "The two lords can explain their grievances to His Majesty in person later, but now, let's follow the decree first." Guards. Several guards took a step forward subconsciously, immediately triggering countless swords and spears to be drawn. The commander of the city watch waved his hand. "Put them away. This is the small council, weapons are not for use here." The commander turned to Hannah. "His Majesty would not be so rash, that decree must be a misunderstanding." Hannah showed anger on her face. "Do you want to defy the decree?" "I dare not. I only know that His Majesty entrusted the city watch to me, and I must ensure that King's Landing and the Red Keep are peaceful and without incident." The expression of doubt on the commander's face was clear to everyone. "Even if that secret edict is indeed real, I don't care how His Majesty punishes me after returning to the palace, but in any case, I will not allow any action now." These are two small council members. Varys and Littlefinger had already exchanged glances with most of the courtiers. Renly then stood up. Chapter 62. Why not have the two ministers return to their residences and stay behind closed doors? "We can send people to guard them outside, which wouldn't violate the secret decree's instructions," Renley advised Hannah. "Besides, the king has already arrived in the Riverlands. Sending a letter won't take much time." He smiled. "I wonder if my saying this counts as being one of the so-called opposers and pleaders." "I agree." The Red Keep's castellan interjected, "Logically, the decree should be conveyed by me, but this time is unusual, so it's best to be cautious." Renley was surprised that the Red Keep's castellan, who held some weight, would directly state his stance. But that no longer mattered. He knew his eldest brother's temperament. If the brave Robert truly knew about this, he would probably have rushed back with his hammer and smashed the two traitors into mincemeat. Therefore, this wasn't a secret decree at all, but a coup d'état launched by the Lannisters. In this kind of vortex, what did a castellan's verbal support amount to? Renley didn't care about these minor details. He only felt a deep sense of unease. Was this coup only targeting Varys and Littlefinger? Or was it a complete falling out with the Lannisters? How foolish and arrogant! Was this Duke Tywin's decision? Had he come out of Casterly Rock? With how many troops? Renley could only prepare for the worst. If a real fight broke out, facing over 150 Lannister guards and 300 gold cloaks, Renley's own 20-odd Storm's End soldiers would clearly be insufficient to protect him. Therefore, he had to win the support of the royal guards and the courtiers and attendants present. 200 royal guards were enough to turn the tide of battle. But since the Usurpers' War, King Robert possessed the Iron Throne and the Crownlands, while Renly's fief was Storm's End, accepting the allegiance of the Stormlands lords. The two brothers were no longer the same stag. Renly didn't have the authority to command the royal guards. Moreover, the decree's orders didn't call for the immediate execution of the ministers, but still required the king's personal judgment. In this situation, the royal guards were more likely to side with the Lannisters, who claimed to possess the secret decree. Fortunately, the courtiers and attendants together numbered 300 or 400 swords. Renly looked at the handsome Knight of Flowers, Loras Tyrell, and gave a courteous smile. The Knight of Flowers immediately understood, "I agree with Lord Renly's view. Letting the two ministers have a few days of peace in their residences can avoid irreparable harm and not violate the decree. Isn't that good? I am willing to personally stand guard." The courtiers and knights close to the Tyrell family also echoed in agreement. Sir Aerys Oakhart of the King's Guard immediately rebuked, "Who gave you the right to speak here? Shut your mouths!" Boom! More courtiers clamored, expressing that they couldn't tolerate such humiliation, and every knight had the right to speak. The originally solemn and dignified atmosphere was completely chaotic. Hannah bit her lip. Whose man was Aerys? Did he not know that his words would anger everyone? Were the people protesting really feeling humiliated, or were they doing it because they were on good terms with certain people? Hannah was a little frustrated. The Crown Prince had clearly instructed her to take down Varys and Littlefinger through political procedures as much as possible, but now it seemed that much blood would probably still be shed. But she was fortunate to hear the prince's clear voice say, "Don't worry, everything is about to end." Bang! A loud noise came from the doorway, and bright light instantly swept across the hall, along with the sound of armor clashing. Everyone subconsciously looked over. Varys and Littlefinger knew that reinforcements had arrived, so they turned around with smiles, their smiles freezing in place. The heavy doors of the throne room were pushed open by golden cloaks, and a figure stood in the middle of the doorway. Countless gold cloaks poured into the hall from both sides of him. "The Hound!" The commander of the city watch exclaimed, pointing at the figure, his face full of disbelief. "How did you bring my men?" The Hound lifted his mask, revealing a ferocious face, and approached the short, stout commander step by step. People quietly watched the Hound, covered in blood. The Hound patted his shoulder mockingly, "I heard your old man was a butcher. Did he only teach you to eat meat and not how to distinguish your master? What your men? They are all the king's men." The commander looked at the newly arrived gold cloaks. Some were familiar, some were new, but the way they looked at him was no longer respectful. He was about to scold them, but those cold eyes immediately extinguished all his anger and confidence. Although he didn't know the reason, he knew that the city watch was no longer his. The commander forced a smile, "Lord Sandor, I am loyal to His Majesty, we are on the same side." "Hat!" The Hound stared into his eyes, "Guess what I want to do now?" The commander tried not to look away, but dense beads of sweat kept seeping out of his forehead, and his heart was pounding violently. "Lord Sandor," the commander moved his fingers. "I really can't guess, he suddenly exploded, drawing his dagger and stabbing at the Hound with all his might. The Hound easily grabbed his wrist holding the blade, then caught the incoming left fist. He clenched his hands, crack, crack, almost crushing the bones, and finally struck with his knee. Clang! The dagger fell from his trembling right hand onto the floor tiles. The intense pain in his internal organs made the commander's face as red as a cooked shrimp. The Hound kicked him down with both feet. "Everyone, you've all seen it, right? This guy not only disobeyed His Majesty's decree, but also took the lead in attacking. Is there any doubt about his rebellious intentions?" The Hound picked up the dagger dropped by the commander. "In the name of the king, Janos Slint, the former commander of the city watch of King's Landing, is to be executed immediately." The Hound didn't even bend over, flicking the dagger directly through Janos's neck. Janos stretched out his arms helplessly, begging for help, struggling feebly, but the blood flowed more and more, his breathing became weaker and weaker, until he stiffened into a twisted corpse. Still, no one spoke. The gold cloaks brought by the Hound probably outnumbered everyone else combined. The royal guards, who had originally leaned towards believing the secret decree, immediately drew their swords and pointed them at the 300 gold cloaks under Janos's command. The situation completely reversed. Hannah issued a final ultimatum. The decree states that all subordinates are to be pardoned for their crimes and remain in their respective positions. Now is the last chance. The gold cloaks stationed in the Red Keep looked at each other. Who dared to face the swords of their fellow soldiers and guards, who outnumbered them several times over? Clang! Clang! After a few breaths, there were hundreds more ownerless spears on the ground. Hannah began to convey the prince's instructions. "Lord Varys, Lord Littlefinger, accept supervision quietly. Only in this way will you have a chance to clear your names." She approached the two and whispered, "In fact, the Crown Prince doesn't believe in your crimes either." The prince even pleaded with His Majesty for this, and was scolded severely. "Please rest assured for a while, and when His Majesty and the others return to the palace, there will definitely be a turning point." Only a fool would believe that. But Varys and Littlefinger knew that this was a subtle expression, meaning that the two sides still had a chance to coexist, and didn't have to fight to the death. But was this expression necessarily true? To speak or not to speak? The two faced a difficult choice. To speak meant certain death on the spot. Not speaking meant possible death later, but also possibly not. "Let's go, my lords." The Hound and dozens of Lannister guards surrounded them. They ultimately didn't reveal the information that would surely lead to mutual destruction, the mystery of Joffrey's parentage. The small council meeting ended. The courtiers hurriedly dispersed, as if a terrifying monster was following behind them. Beneath the Iron Throne, Hannah coldly stared at the staggering back of the Red Keep's castellan. Chapter 64, Summer. As of today, Bran is already adept at using his talent. He can transform into a bird and soar into the sky, turn into a frog and hop around, enter the body of a trout and swim in the river. Of course, his favorite is still his dire wolf. Bran struggled for a long time with the dire wolf's name, but fortunately, after confiding in the Crown Prince these past few days, he accepted the prince's suggestion. Summer. Summer. The summer in the south is the real summer. Unlike Winterfell, no matter the season, you have to dress thickly, which especially affects climbing. The prince really didn't lie. Thinking of this, Bran couldn't help but grumble about the stingy area. That magical steel piece can allow people to talk to the prince and Jon in the north, but Arya only lets him use it for a short while each time, which is completely unsatisfying, and she won't budge even if he threatens to tell their father. What a stingy ghost. Bran felt that if it were him, he would definitely be much more generous. Anyone who wanted to use it could. But he wasn't jealous. Arya's gift was a talking piece of steel. His sister Sansa had a crown of winter roses, as bright as new, seemingly eternally unchanging. He was saved by the prince, and also gained the magical ability to enter the bodies of animals, and he could see a colorless world with his eyes closed. In comparison, Bran was very satisfied with his gift. With these unique eyes, Bran was able to see many sights he couldn't see before during the journey south. He saw the king and his father drinking wine and eating meat together, hunting together, laughing and scolding, not hiding their true thoughts at all. The two of them were even closer than Bran and his older brother. He saw his sister Sansa and Jane Poole whispering together, suddenly blushing. He saw Arya making friends with many people in the team or along the way, playing around everywhere, running around outside all day, not returning to camp until dark. Her temper was still so stubborn. Recently, Arya had become obsessed with wooden sword fighting, and practiced with a butcher's apprentice named Micah by the river every day, not giving up even when her arms were bruised purple by the wooden sword. Her temper was still so stubborn. In the past, Bran would have couldn't help but run out to play. But now it's different. Since gaining these eyes, he has gradually come to enjoy observing this wonderful world from various angles, and besides, there aren't many towers to climb along the way. The inn where they are currently staying is the same. Although it covers a wide area and is built of white stone for a full 3 floors, it is not tall enough for him at all. Summer is still more interesting. So Bran lay down on the bed and entered Summer's body with his consciousness. Summer, who was lying on the ground by the bed, quickly stood up on all fours, blinked his intelligent eyes, and slipped out of the open door quickly. Summer walked quietly down the stairs, but the road was not smooth. Already the size of an ordinary adult wolf, the inn waiters who encountered the dire wolf were weak in their hands and feet, standing blankly in place and not daring to move a step until it passed by before running away in panic. Bran was already used to people's reactions. The team changed camps every day or two, not giving people time to get used to the dire wolf, so every time he went out as Summer, it would cause a commotion. His father had advised him to take good care of Summer, but Bran only endured it for a few days. There was no way, he had already fallen in love with this feeling, and Summer wouldn't really hurt anyone, he would only forage in the wild. Bran and Summer walked down the inn lobby. Sear Barristan the Bold and the Kingslayer were both here, as well as many Lannister people, who had not gone hunting with King Robert. Bran had long been aware of the king's habits. The king almost never went a day without dragging his father around hunting beasts, and recently he was even unwilling to bring many guards, setting off with only his father and a few others. In the king's own words, "When Ned and I join forces, we can smash even the Targaryens to pieces, what do we need guards for?" Even so, his father still insisted on bringing a dozen soldiers with him every time. Before walking out the door, Bran took a good look at the inn with Summer's eyes. They were going to break camp tomorrow. He saw the soldiers laughing and toasting. He saw several maids beside the queen carrying wine and food upstairs, where Queen Cersei, Prince Tommen, Princess Myrcella and his sister Sansa were having a harmonious conversation. He saw the chubby landlady Marcia had bending over to pour wine for Sir Jaime, revealing more than a dozen blood-red teeth. He remembered that when they first entered the inn, the landlady also smiled and sent sweet cakes to the children. Bran was very satisfied with the cakes, but the landlady's blood-red smile always made people feel scared. But now he smelled it, it wasn't the smell of blood, but the lingering smell of tobacco. Bran wasn't afraid at all, he and Summer ran towards the forest. The land, grass and figures rushed backwards in his eyes, the fresh wind wrapped his silver fur and smoky grey-yellow eyes. This was him now. Bran knew this was the world he wanted. He could smell the most subtle tastes in the soil, he could smell the scent of animals miles away, and simple grilled meat also had many different charming smells that made people's appetites soar. He could also see the scenery at night, not with his own eyes, but completely with summer's own vision. The feeling was very wonderful. There were no bright colors, but the grey world also had clear and distinct shapes, and he finally knew what he looked like in summer's eyes. He also heard many, many things. As long as he lay quietly in a corner, people would not care about this dire wolf with its ears pricked up, and would talk about everything without restraint. Bran therefore learned some of people's true thoughts. They seemed to hate everything in the world, whether beautiful or ugly, good or bad. Are adults all so bad? He plunged into the forest and ran wildly all the way, not thinking about anything, just dodging the countless trees in front of him, jumping up for a while, turning for a while, and sliding under the tree holes for a while. He forgot everything in the world, he just wanted to keep running like this. But Summer was still tired. Bran felt bursts of hunger coming from his stomach, much stronger than humans, almost as if he hadn't eaten for half a year. He raised his wolf head and looked around, sniffed. King Robert and his father were hunting wild cattle in the forest. The beasts and birds suitable for Summer to eat had already fled far away. He ran towards the direction of the water vapor, and finally arrived at the confluence of the Green Fork and the Blue Fork. There must be fish here. He saw Arya and Micah fighting not far away. He remembered. This was where Arya said she wanted to find rubies, the battlefield where King Robert killed Rhaegar. Ruby Ford. He stepped into the shallow stream on all fours. The taste of trout was fresh and strong. Summer happily grinned. But it immediately jumped back to the shore. Bran looked upstream. The foul and bloody smell was constantly approaching, and a large, long shadow was hidden under water. Summer struggled with fear and unease. Bran remembered the neck on the way south, where there was a smell almost exactly the same as this shadow. Lizard Lions. Chapter 65. Bran's body jolted upright in bed, his dull eyes gradually clearing. He remembered. Startled, Summer had rejected his consciousness, and he had returned to his own body. Bran wiped away non-existent cold sweat, controlling his body, which had not yet fully adjusted, as he sluggishly climbed out of bed, his mind still marveling at the shadow in the river. What a huge lizard lion, it could probably swallow a person whole in one bite. Why would a lizard lion run out of the neck? Bran didn't understand. He wanted to ask his grace, who possessed much magical knowledge, but the steel piece had been malfunctioning for over half a month, and Arya had been sad about it for a good half a day. He had to tell everyone about the danger in the river. Bran made a decision. Get out of the way, we are men of House Tully, with urgent information to report to the king. Don't block the road. Urgent hoofbeats and shouts came from the west. Bran walked to the window, and a dozen or so riders in chainmail and leather armor galloped from the river road towards them, finally stopping outside the inn, dismounting, and rushing inside without a moment's delay. The riders disappeared from Bran's view, leaving only flustered servants outside the window leading the horses. Bran couldn't completely suppress the curiosity in his heart. Since gaining this magical ability, he had become increasingly unable to endure the pain of not seeing. He skillfully slipped into the body of a little bird, flying to the rafters of the inn. The panting riders attracted the attention of everyone in the hall. The leading messenger opened a wooden box, containing 2 letters sealed with the sigils of the dire wolf and the trout respectively. The messenger looked around, not seeing a crown. My lords, Duke Hoster has sent us to deliver letters. His Grace the Crown Prince and Lady Stark have sent urgent information from Winterfell. May I ask, where is His Majesty the King? Sear Barristan stepped in front of the messenger. His Majesty is not here. I am Sear Barristan Selmy, Captain of the King's Guard. Give the letters to me. You are a great knight. The messenger presented the wooden box, but his face showed no sign of relief. Although I don't know the contents of the letters, the Duke instructed us to inform His Majesty the King as quickly as possible. We have hundreds of soldiers behind us coming to support us. Please, my lord, take this seriously. Barristan immediately became serious. The King's Slayer stood up and said, Captain, what are you waiting for? The King and Lord Eddard probably won't be back until night. Either go into the woods to find them, or quickly open the letters and take a look, lest we delay important matters. The little bird on the rafters hoped to know the contents of the letters now. Baristan did not disappoint the little bird's expectations. He opened the letter, and although he didn't read it aloud, the little bird could fly to a suitable position itself. Flap, flap. The little bird's movements did not attract anyone's attention. Before the two letters were forcefully closed by a tense hand, its bright black eyes saw some words: Bloodraven, King's Landing, controlling beasts, attack, King, Duke Stark, support. The shadow of the lizard lion uncontrollably invaded Bran's mind. He immediately thought of a terrifying scene. No. Bran jumped out of bed again, but this time he actively withdrew from the little bird. He pushed open the door and ran frantically downstairs, even knocking down several servants in a row, but none of that mattered anymore. He rushed into the hall and saw Sear Baristan and the King's Slayer in a heated argument. There's a lizard lion in the river, a huge lizard lion, I saw it. Father and the king are in danger, go save them. All eyes focused on him. Bran only cared about pleading with the two King's Guard, believe me, everything I said is true. There's a monster in the river, the monster is about to attack. Please act quickly, it will be too late. Sear Baristan made a decision, no risk can be ignored, I would rather believe this is true. Prepare immediately. The King's Slayer inexplicably smiled. Hundreds of elite soldiers were quickly assembled. After a brief explanation of the mission, the team immediately went deep into the forest. Even after repeated requests, Bran was still left at the inn. He wanted to enter Summer's body again, but he still failed. He had to choose a hunting dog and quietly follow. Hundreds of kilometers away, Joffrey took a deep breath. The letter had been delivered, the king was hunting, and the lizard lions were already in position, only needing the final strike. Joffrey closed his eyes, his mind completely focused on the magical beast thousands of miles away. He opened his eyes again, and in his vision was a clear, flowing curtain of water. Other than aquatic plants, no fish or shrimp dared to appear before this monster's eyes. The lizard lion brought many strange senses. It was like experiencing another crossing, the world felt completely different from before, everything felt like a first experience. No wonder Bran was so addicted that he couldn't extricate himself. It was time to act. Joffrey flicked the lizard lion's thick, powerful tail. The next second, he teleported to the riverbank, so fast. He climbed ashore, ambushing in the woods by the beach, waiting for the king to arrive. King Robert was laughing loudly while holding a broken spear. At his feet was the huge wild ox that had just been killed in the duel. How was that, Ned? I told you there wouldn't be a problem. Who am I? The man who personally smashed Rhaegar. The king pointed to the river next to the woods, right there, I still remember the scene that day, Ruby Ford? Haha, a good name. Yes, your majesty. Eddard was unwilling to talk too much about Rhaegar, as it always reminded him of his sister Lyanna's dying request. That child, actually mingling with Joffrey, it's really worrying. Eddard didn't like Jon's choice, but forcing Jon to join the Night's Watch wasn't a solution either, so he could only worry silently. Whoosh! Whoosh! The grass in the west rustled rhythmically, almost allowing one to imagine the posture of the beast moving. The king excitedly nudged Eddard, saying in a faint voice that only he would make at this time, "There's prey again, don't move, watch how I catch it." Eddard had long been accustomed to silence. The king changed to a long spear, tiptoeing closer to the bushes. Roar! The prey was still startled, turning into a black shadow and fleeing directly to the west. Ha! It's a big wild boar! The king shouted excitedly, and then started running after it. Eddard and a dozen soldiers followed closely behind. Bran did not cherish his current body. The hunting dog accelerated recklessly, quickly surpassing the large group of soldiers in front, getting closer and closer to the king and his father. He smelled his father's scent, and the smell of blood. He could almost imagine the heartbreaking tragedy, but fortunately when he arrived there, he found only a dead wild ox. He continued to chase along the scent. As he ran, he suddenly felt that this road was very familiar. The smell of water vapor reminded him that he and Summer had walked this way, this was the road to the west, ahead was the Ruby Ford. The lizard lion was there. The hunting dog ran even more desperately. The view suddenly brightened, and he finally saw the river and the beach, a big wild boar, and a dozen figures at the edge of the woods. But the huge and terrifying lizard lion was rushing towards the king and his father with 2 rows of sharp teeth. Bran thought despairingly in his heart, it's over. Chapter 66, The Death of a King. The fragrance lingered on his tongue, refusing to dissipate. Joffrey rinsed his mouth with wine again and again, but the delightful, sweet taste seemed to penetrate his very soul, rich and intense. Yet, he would have preferred to taste sourness and bitterness. As far as he knew, people shouldn't eat people, at least not in the physical sense. It was all the lizard lion's fault, the creature shouldn't even possess a sense of taste. This feeling was too bizarre. He had never imagined that his final impression of the king would be so delicious and temptingly decadent. It was almost like devouring the personification of power from the king's body, both real and surreal. Power had a flavor. Perhaps it was due to this association that he couldn't even control the lizard lion from slightly restraining itself, only able to watch it tear apart the king's body with savage abandon. The king's death was irreversible. From that moment on, he knew clearly that he had completely transformed. No matter how things unfolded in the future, he, now stepping onto the stage, had completely lost any chance of retreat. Once the crown was on, there would be no peaceful way to take it off. King Robert I of House Baratheon is dead, may he rest in peace. Everyone, from Queen Cersei downwards, wore expressions of grief, and many servants who loved and respected the king cried out in sorrow. The king's body was covered with a golden banner, with many dark red patches of blood seeping from various places. Without a doubt, the king did not pass away peacefully. Eddard stared blankly, feeling as if it were a nightmare. Just an ordinary day. Moments ago, Robert was still boasting about his strength, his laughter loud enough to spread throughout the forest, but then he encountered such a monster and ended up like this. Wasn't this a nightmare? Lizard lions had actually appeared in the Riverlands, and they were stronger and larger than ever seen before. Eddard instantly realized the danger. He tried his best to protect his good brother, but that damned boar had blocked him for a few breaths. Only a few breaths, but it was the difference between life and death. By the time Eddard and half of the soldiers had crossed the bloody, mangled boar and rushed towards the king, all of the soldiers there were already lying on the ground, and Robert's body was being tossed around in the monster's long mouth, with blood and flesh constantly dripping. It was only at this point that Sear Barristan and the other knights finally appeared behind them, but it was too late. Ruby Ford, the place where Rhaegar had fallen, had ultimately become Robert's burial ground as well. Was this a joke played on the world by the gods in heaven? Or a punishment for the usurper? A heavy, cold piece of steel suddenly pressed down on Eddard's heart, making him almost unable to grip his sword hilt, and the fire of revenge became his last and only motivation. He led the team towards the lizard lion. The ferocious monster knew to be afraid at this point, immediately dropping Robert's broken body and running towards the river with a wag of its tail, but its speed was far slower than when it had attacked. Eddard quickly caught up, holding his long sword and slowing the lizard lion's steps. Barristan and Jaime and the other knights quickly joined the battle. More soldiers tacitly surrounded the king-slaying monster, and the battle area wasn't large. If they rushed in, they would only cause trouble. Ordinary soldiers suddenly became a group of spectators. The monster was still roaring, and the king's body lay quietly on the beach, violently impacting people's minds and brutally stuffing the truth into their heads. A beast had killed the king. Who could have imagined it? They were starting to believe those absurd plots from the legends and stories. The battle went very smoothly. The enraged knights displayed their greatest skills. The monster had completely reverted to a beast with only instincts, senselessly wasting its strength. It was easily lured by the long swords used as bait, snapping left and right, charging forward, and sweeping its tail back, but the only thing it could touch was the sharp edge of the blades. Deadly threats were coming from all directions, and it didn't dare to focus on attacking any one enemy, only able to crawl back and forth in the small circle, wary of everything. It wanted to mobilize that power within its body, but there was no response at all, as if it had never existed. Apart from its abnormal size, it was no different from the lizard lions in the neck back then, and its speed was even slower and its reactions more sluggish. Suddenly, it shook its head and let out an angry, painful roar. One of its eyes was gone. The knights had seized the opening. The gilded longsword directly pierced the lizard lion's remaining eye, and in an instant, thick, turbid fluid burst out from its eye. Its roar became louder and more frantic. The pitch-black Valyrian steel sword was immediately thrust into the lizard lion's wide-open mouth, and the sharp tip of the sword broke through the hard carapace behind its head, pinning the lizard lion's mouth shut. It couldn't help but roll around, trying to get rid of the steel in its mouth. But more long swords then slashed open its vulnerable abdomen, forcefully cutting through muscles and churning up the more fragile internal organs inside. It collapsed on the riverbank and stopped struggling. The dust settled. The boar hadn't escaped, the king-slaying lizard lion was dead, and revenge for the king had been taken, but was this worth even a shred of joy? Not a single person smiled. Eddard had completely lost his soul. He didn't refuse Jory Castle's support, only blankly watching the soldiers cover Robert with the banner, pull his ice from the lizard lion's mouth, and clean up all traces on the riverbank. Even now, after the team had returned to the inn at the crossroads and the morning ceremony for King Robert was about to end, Eddard was still unable to let go. Was this really not a nightmare? Eddard really wanted to sleep and wake up to hear Robert's laughter again and see that familiar face, even the ridiculously fat belly was so nostalgic. But everything around him was reminding him that it was over. The era of King Robert, who had personally hammered Rhaegar to death, was over. Robert, secretly referred to by some as the usurper, had left the human world and returned to heaven. He heard countless people praying to the gods to grant His Majesty the king rest. But Eddard knew that his good brother, Robert, hated resting the most. Letting him rest was like sending him to hell to be tortured. May the gods grant him love and laughter, and the joy of fighting for justice. Robert, is there fine wine and war in heaven? Is Lyanna there too? Please say hello to her for me, and may we eventually reunite. Lord Hand. Sear Barristan walked over. The situation was urgent at the time, but now, it's all over. His Majesty's departure is a great pain and disaster for the Seven Kingdoms, and the reasons for it may not be simple. Please take a look at this news. That's right. I am the hand of the king. Robert wanted me to help him govern the country, and I must take responsibility. The Seven Kingdoms cannot fall into turmoil again. If only for Robert, for his children. Eddard hid the sadness in his heart deeper and took the wooden box from Barristan with a blank expression. Bran quietly approached his father. Bran didn't know if he was more sad or more relieved. In that situation, he had thought his father was going to die, but the result was much better than he had imagined. Only a king had died. But he also understood his father's feelings at this time. What if they had replaced the king with Robb? No, better not replace him. He was also sad for His Highness. Having lost his only father, His Highness must be very sad. It was all the messenger's fault. If the letter had arrived even half a day earlier, King Robert would have been fine, and none of this would have happened. Bran stared at his father reading the letter, wondering how his father would react. Bloodraven is so hateful. His father suddenly clenched the letter, and his eyes surged with colors he couldn't understand. Bloodraven. Chapter 67, The Mastermind Behind the Scenes. Bloodraven awoke from a dream. He exhaled a deep breath of stale air, the sound echoing in the cave, revealing the faint weakness of a dying man. He hadn't had a green dream in a long time. As is widely known, green seers and some people with powerful talents possess the green vision, and can sometimes see metaphors and symbols foreshadowing the future in their dreams. Although the content of the dream may not be understood at the time, the development of events often confirms its truth. This dream was just as difficult to understand. He dreamed that he was trapped in countless pillars of flame, the flames twisting and dancing, transforming into shapes such as wolves, deer, lions, fish, etc., all filled with anger and sternness, all the flames scolding his schemes and calculations. What does this mean? Bloodraven's heart was filled with unease. These omens were definitely not a good thing. Could it be that I dreamed of my own death? If that were the case, a green seer who had seen through the affairs of the world should gladly accept his fate. Bloodraven was not that kind of person. He decided to try his best to salvage the situation. He had spent too much energy on the wall recently. Something must have happened in the south. He had to take a look at the south. He completely entered the weirwood tree beneath him, plunging into the boundless dark earth and roots, his vision jumping between the gods' woods of castles, listening to the whispers and prayers under the heart trees. The heart tree of Winterfell heard the troubles of Robb Stark and many others. The usurper and the treacherous Grey Wolf were still on the road. The north could be considered peaceful. But since a week ago, the heart tree had become completely lonely. No one approached it anymore. Why? The heart tree of Riverrun saw the ravens coming from the north, and then also lost its confessors and worshippers, and someone even approached with an axe. The heart tree of the Red Keep welcomed many melancholy attendants and courtiers. They whispered their dissatisfaction with the new master of the Red Keep in the woods, vaguely exchanging their views on the two offending members of the small council. They were still asking, is that Bloodraven still alive? Bloodraven's consciousness suddenly trembled. I'm exposed. Did the captured singer tell the son of that usurper? Bloodraven worked even harder to examine the memories of the heart trees. From the south to the north, from castles to the wilderness. Finally, on a weirwood tree in a forest in the Riverlands that didn't even have a face, he heard that person's whisper. Joffrey Baratheon. Weirwood, oh Weirwood, you can hear me, right? That person looked straight over, as if he was talking face to face with Bloodraven now. I hope we can get to Father in time. I hope Bloodraven's attack comes later, so that Father and the others can all be spared from harm. Bloodraven felt a sense of foreboding. What kind of animals will Bloodraven control to launch an attack? The beasts of the Riverlands could never hurt a warrior like my father. He must have racked his brains to choose peerless beasts. But he would never have thought that the conspiracy has already been exposed. Bloodraven understood Joffrey's dark intentions, how vicious. Moreover, this guy can also control beasts. Winterfell and Riverrun already know about the eyes hidden in the God's Woods, and they also know about Bloodraven's malice towards the king and Lord Eddard, his hatred for the current Seven Kingdoms. He can no longer unscrupulously spy on the Seven Kingdoms. So that's how it is. Bloodraven's conspiracy against the Red Keep is already too late to stop, but there is still hope for Father's side. The changes in the Red Keep were actually the work of this anomaly. Unless Bloodraven monitors Father every moment, launching an attack before the messenger arrives, I hope he hasn't done that. Bloodraven calculated the time. Robert was probably already dead. Bloodraven understood, the flames in the dream symbolized the anger of the South towards him now. Can this unfounded accusation still be cleared up? Bloodraven didn't hold much hope. His early court life had left him with many valuable experiences. How could an outsider prove his innocence to the world? Even if he cut open his stomach and took out his heart, it might not be useful. Moreover, there were still those three singers already in the South. Their existence and every word were powerful accusations and irrefutable evidence against him. Bloodraven is really a terrible enemy. Compared to this newly rising anomaly, he, trapped in the haunted forest, had almost no power to resist. Several direct and indirect confrontations had ended in failure. Exposing information unfavorable to this guy to the lords of the South? His image had already been greatly compromised, the effect was unknown, but he himself was very likely to be eliminated first. Mutual destruction was already the best ending. Wise man of the children of the forest, green seer beyond the wall, I sincerely ask you, be sure to remove the evil Bloodraven as soon as possible. Bloodraven couldn't help but be stunned. At that time, the people of the Seven Kingdoms will rejoice for this, and you will also become the throne's closest friend. The gods have granted me unimaginable divine power, ordering me to establish a heaven on earth. I am willing to share this glory with you. The power of life, resurrection, light, and redemption are all in it. Please consider it carefully. I have to continue on my way. Goodbye. Bloodraven withdrew from the weirwood tree. The cave was still dark and silent, as if it had never changed, very suitable for the dead to rest. Living things were the anomalies here. He muttered to himself, who am I? A singer happened to walk into the cave holding food. You are the last green seer. Countless images appeared in Bloodraven's mind. The fair heart-shaped face of the lover he deeply loved, her long silver hair, her charming eyes, one blue and one green, her smooth back. Cold Iron's gloomy and angry face, his annoying personal sigil, his delusional thoughts and wild words about Shira. And the gentle and kind good brother, and the Blackfire rebellion he fought for. He himself commanded the shooting to death of Daemon Blackfire and his two sons, and more blurred figures also jumped before his eyes. They all waved to him, then walked away, gradually dissipating into nothingness. The green seer sighed, yes, I can hardly remember it anymore, I am the last green seer. Anomaly, what are your intentions? What are you doing? Joffrey was communicating with the Red Keep. Hannah and the Hound were reporting on the specific results of the past 2 days. Congratulations, Your Majesty. Joffrey interrupted Hannah, passing on a message, it's too early, the king is still alive and well, I am just the crown prince. Please forgive me, Your Highness. Hannah immediately changed her words, thanks to His Majesty's attention, thanks to His Highness's blessing. Currently, we have taken over 1,000 little birds from Varys, and cleared out more than 300 rebels who refused to obey. We have seized 62 brothels and more than 200 taverns and other shops from Littlefinger's hands. The heads of the treasury, the mint, and the port have all sworn allegiance to the throne, and most of the merchants in the city are operating normally, with only a few troublemakers. Joffrey was very satisfied, it's good to be quiet. Don't cause panic, King's Landing can't be in chaos. Hannah was very confident, thanks to His Majesty's mercy, pardoning these people's sins, they naturally won't stand up for traitors. The Hound asked, what should we do with Varys and Littlefinger? Joffrey still wanted to squeeze out more benefits, cut off their limbs, castrate Littlefinger. Show them the power of magic, tell them that only by obediently listening and proving their value can they become normal people again. The Hound couldn't help but feel a chill. You just need to do your best to maintain the stability of the Red Keep and King's Landing, it won't take too long. Joffrey's eyes were deep, it will be soon. Tomorrow I will be able to reunite with father and the others. Will I really be able to cry then? Chapter 68, Crossroads Inn. At Queen Cersei's request, King Robert's body remained in the inn so Prince Joffrey could see his father one last time. As a sign of respect and mourning, the Whitestone Inn had been draped in thick black cloth, and the people coming and going had somehow found black clothes, and there was no laughter. The landlady, Martha Heddle, stood outside, gazing at the transformed inn with mixed feelings. Her inn was located at the crossroads of the King's Road running north and south, the River Road to the west, and the Vale Road to the east, hence the name Crossroads Inn. It had existed for centuries and had changed names many times. Because of the various special events that had occurred here in the past, it had been called the Double Crown Inn, the Bell Inn, and the Raging Dragon Inn. Now, the landlady wondered if the inn's name would have to be changed again. The king did not die on the throne, nor was the ceremony presided over by the High Septon of the Great September of Baelor, but he died in her small inn, surrounded only by a few nobles, and the rest were soldiers and servants. What name would people give it? Whoosh! A gust of wind blew so hard that she couldn't open her eyes, and she vaguely felt a huge heat leap to her side in an instant, along with a heavy sound like 100 people breathing at the same time. The dust and wind gradually subsided, and she slowly opened a slit in her eyes. Ah! She couldn't even scream and could only collapse weakly to the ground. Could this be the monster that killed the king? Had they come again? After waiting for a long time, and still not being torn to pieces, she slowly opened her eyes again and raised her head. A handsome young man in red and gold finery was riding on the monster, looking forward with an extremely serious expression. She recognized him. The monster was the lion from a few months ago, almost twice as big, and the young man was the crown prince of the Seven Kingdoms, the new king-to-be. Behind him sat a woman with a spear, and a few others. What kind of monster was this? She scrambled away, using both hands and feet, and only felt a little relieved when she retreated to the door of the inn. Only then did she notice the figure on another white bear. The imp was struggling to climb down from the white bear's fur, and another black-haired boy was holding a white wolf with blood-red eyes. The crown prince asked in a trembling voice, "Father, what's wrong with him?" What else needed to be said? The black color everywhere was the clearest explanation and answer. Martha just kept bowing and saluting. Soon, many nobles poured out of the inn. The travel-worn crown prince and others were pushed into the center of the crowd, receiving countless sad gazes and expressions. Queen Cersei, carrying a black velvet dress, ran to her beloved son, then hugged the crown prince tightly and sobbed. "Joffrey, your father, he has been murdered by Bloodraven." People lowered their heads in silence. That's right, the notorious Duke Bloodraven. Even the landlady, who didn't want to get involved in noble affairs, knew that Bloodraven was still alive, still watching the Seven Kingdoms from beyond the wall. But the crown prince didn't seem to hear. "Mother, I have urgent information to tell father, where is he?" Everyone couldn't help but be stunned. The dauntless Baristan shook his head and walked to the crown prince's side. "Your father is in the main room on the 3rd floor of the inn." The crown prince immediately pushed through the crowd and rushed into the inn. Sear Baristan explained, "His Highness is probably too grief-stricken and unwilling to remember any news of His Majesty Robert's death. I have seen some cases like this before." People immediately understood and sighed at the depth of the father-son relationship. The crowd surged into the inn again, leaving only the landlady and servants outside who were not qualified to pay their respects. Martha sighed and continued to guess the new name of her inn. When the crowd gathered at the place where King Robert's body was laid, Joffrey had been standing there blankly for a long time. The layout here was quite simple. The 7 statues of the gods, which should have been 7 jong tall and carved from marble, had become rough wooden statues collected from nearby small chapels. The altar of the mother was so small that it could only accommodate one person kneeling. The statue of the stranger, responsible for guiding the dead to another world and where King Robert's coffin was placed, was not at all terrifying or mysterious. and was almost shorter than Tyrion. Only the strong smell of incense in the air was still in place. After all, there were plenty of candles in the team. Joffrey saw a full 100 candles burning, sending 100 blessings to the king in heaven. May he enjoy these 100 blessings and fight happily in heaven, and no longer miss the human world. The crowd quietly watched the Crown Prince's stagnant back, and they could almost imagine the Crown Prince's expression at this time. Gods bless, the new king of the 7 kingdoms must be wise and benevolent. Joffrey's voice was hoarse, let's set off immediately. Father's final resting place is the holy and magnificent Great September of Baelor, the supreme heaven. He should not stay in this place for too long. The crowd looked at each other. Queen Cersei walked out of the crowd. Joffrey, we have to accept the reality with grief. Robert has left us, and the country needs a new king to rule. The queen walked to King Robert's side and picked up the stag crown placed on the silver plate. You must take responsibility, don't be defeated by grief, bravely accept your mission, the 7 kingdoms need you. The queen held the crown high in both hands and approached the crown prince step by step. The crowd became even quieter, even slowing their breathing. Sear Barristan, the captain of the king's guard, did not move. He gripped the hilt of the sword at his waist, ready to offer his sword and everything to the new king. Duke Eddard Stark, the hand of the king, did not move. How could he say no to Robert's son? Jaime did not move. He silently watched Cersei place the crown on Joffrey's head inch by inch, wondering what the future of the 7 kingdoms would be like. Was Joffrey's change during this time a disguise or reality? Bran, Sansa, and more people just stared at this scene in shock. The new king was ascending the throne. How many times would one be fortunate enough to see it in one's life? The crown finally landed steadily on the head of the new king. Queen Cersei held the new king's face and showed a moving smile, then helped the new king slowly turn around to face the crowd. Shua! The crowd uniformly lowered, the friction and collision of armor and clothing condensed into a loud voice, declaring the beginning of the ceremony. The Queen Mother's chief steward chanted in a timely manner. Welcome Joffrey I, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, ruler of the 7 kingdoms and protector of the realm, of House Baratheon and House Lannister. There was one more name, but could they say no now? The crowd immediately shouted the loudest voice, even if their throats were hoarse afterward. Long live King Joffrey! Sear Barristan stepped forward, knelt on one knee, and offered his most cherished sword. Your Majesty, my sword is yours. I will always be your loyal knight, until the end of my life. Joffrey took the sword and returned it to the captain of the King's Guard. Your loyalty is beyond question, please rise. Then it was Duke Eddard, who presented the circular hand of the King badge. Your Majesty, Winterfell and the North will always be your loyal subjects. If your Majesty allows me to resign and return, I will also guard the stability of the North for your Majesty. Joffrey took the badge and returned it without hesitation. Before I take personal control, I order the hand of the King, Eddard Stark, the Queen Mother, Cersei Lannister and Duke Tywin Lannister of Casterly Rock to jointly rule. Eddard raised his head in shock. Chapter 69, The Bloodthirsty Throne. The mournful and solemn procession finally set off. At the head of the procession was King Robert's coffin, escorted by the King's Guard knights Jaime Lannister and Boros Blount. The hastily crowned new King Joffrey I, hand of the King Eddard Stark, Sear Barristan Selmy and other courtiers followed behind. Supply wagons, women, children, and guards brought up the rear. When the procession made its first camp, the hand of the King, Eddard, could not wait to enter the King's tent. Eddard had many questions. Your Majesty, how much do you know about Bloodraven? Where is he? The Night's Watch must be able to find him. Joffrey, already dressed in a deep black robe, said, Lord Eddard, do not be too anxious. Bloodraven is not to be underestimated, it will be difficult to eliminate him in a short time. We must learn to be patient. Joffrey fabricated a story that was half true and half false. Most of my knowledge of him comes from the children of the forest. He hides in the depths of the haunted forest beyond the wall, using only weirwood trees and the eyes of animals to spy on the 7 kingdoms, never showing his face. All of this was said in the letter. Joffrey stared into Eddard's eyes. Furthermore, Bloodraven has long planned for King's Landing and the Red Keep. Some people have secret and dirty connections with him. I suppose you don't know what has happened in King's Landing these past few days. Eddard bowed slightly. Please enlighten me, Your Majesty. Joffrey did not speak, but instead used magic to transmit his voice to Eddard. Please keep the following news absolutely secret. Do not panic, it is I who am speaking. Feeling strange, Eddard tried to calm himself. Was this the magic that Catelyn mentioned in her letter? I dreamed of a prophecy. The 7 kingdoms, and even the world, will face a calamity of destruction. After the others invade, the long night will come. The gods have bestowed upon me this divine power, ordering me to fight against the darkness and the cold monsters. The prophecy includes Bloodraven's shadow. He has many accomplices in King's Landing, including Varys and Peter. Eddard could only listen silently, not knowing how to question him. From that time on, I paid special attention to these 2 counselors. Taking advantage of father's absence from the Red Keep, they might make small moves, so I secretly made arrangements, using the blessings of the gods to make Sandor a warrior capable of fighting 100 men, ensuring the stability of King's Landing. Eddard immediately realized, something had happened in King's Landing. Indeed, something happened. Bloodraven seems to have colluded with Varys and the others. I happened to receive a message from Sandor the day before yesterday that Varys and Peter launched an attack, and almost the entire city watch of King's Landing betrayed us. Fortunately, Sandor subdued them. Then father was also killed by Bloodraven right after. This is definitely not a coincidence. Eddard seemed to be able to picture Bloodraven's face. Insidious, cunning, and inhuman, like a combination of Littlefinger and Varys. Joffrey's telepathic voice was filled with endless pain and regret. The prophecy clearly did not include this scene of father's death. How could it have turned out like this? I was too negligent. The gods will not forgive me. Eddard felt almost the same way. Watching Robert die with his own eyes, he could not forgive himself even now. There was still hope. Joffrey spoke again telepathically. When we parted in Winterfell, I gave Arya a steel shard that allows people to communicate with each other across thousands of miles. Bran and she have both used it to talk to Jon, so it can be used to transmit information. Eddard remembered the inconspicuous steel shard that Arya treasured. So, it was such a strange object. A week ago, the children of the forest told me about Bloodraven's conspiracy. I thought of the steel shard at the time, but then the steel shard suddenly lost its effect. It must have been Bloodraven's doing. After that, we could only travel at full speed and have Lady Catelyn release a raven. Unexpectedly, it was still one step too late. Eddard shook his head. He knew that no one was to blame. As long as Bloodraven could monitor this side, he could act at any time. No matter how fast they were, they could not save Robert's life. Robert loved hunting too much. He was exposed to Bloodraven's beasts almost every day. Eddard smiled sadly. It turned out that it was still Robert's fault. What we can do now is to eliminate Bloodraven's eyes as much as possible, and not allow him to spy on the 7 kingdoms without restraint. Joffrey gave Eddard a firm look. When we have accumulated enough strength, even if Bloodraven runs to the land of always winter, we will completely eliminate him. Eddard looked at the children of the forest outside the tent, who were the focus of everyone's attention. Yes, your majesty. Eddard walked towards the children of the forest. Joffrey quietly watched Leaf describe Bloodraven's information to the hand of the king. The information he revealed was difficult to refute. The content of the prophecy was true, the magic was true, Bloodraven's abilities were also true, and the result of the changes in King's Landing was also true. Without presupposing that Joffrey was the murderer, Bloodraven was the only answer. That was enough. Every king is bound to have many suspicious cases and stains on his body. As long as there is no conclusive evidence, then they are not true, but just smears and rumors from hostile forces and villains. Even Eddard, who values honor, could not choose to oppose the king merely because of suspicion. Queen Cersei walked into the tent and signaled the servants to leave. The Queen Mother's steward was the last to leave, closing the tent's curtain. The tent immediately became dim and quiet. Cersei sat down beside her son. Little Joffrey, what are you thinking, letting Eddard Stark be regent? Letting him continue to be hand is already a great gift. Joffrey saw his mother's lips continue to move, but she did not speak again. There should still be a second half hidden in her heart. Why let father be regent too? I'm afraid father prefers Casterly Rock and Lanny Sport. He doesn't want to come to King's Landing. Joffrey comforted her. Mother, don't worry, I have carefully considered it. Our situation is very dangerous. Not to mention my true parentage. Are the great lords willing to submit wholeheartedly? Cersei snorted. Who dares to cause trouble? Joffrey continued to persuade. Lord Eddard can bring us the support of the North, the Riverlands, and the Vale. With the Crownlands and grandfather's Westerlands, our rule will be stable. Besides, Joffrey took his mother's hand. Don't I know that mother loves me the most? Lord Eddard's regency is just a title. Grandfather Tywin still has the entire Westerlands to worry about. In the end, it is still us who rule the country. Cersei's expression softened slightly. Joffrey added, don't forget Renley. He won't be captured without a fight. The lords of the Stormlands are his vassals, and he is also on good terms with Highgarden. The more troops we have, the safer we will be. Cersei realized the danger. Renley will rebel. That was obvious. Joffrey made a decision. From last night to today, the brief life of a king, people's attitudes and questions made him understand his true position. Noble, but without authority. According to the political system, he could not handle state affairs before the age of 16. The regent and prime minister would exercise the power of the king in his place. How could this be? It would be 4 years before he came of age. By then, the others would have already invaded the 7 kingdoms, and the long night might have already descended, and he would have just begun to rule. Joffrey's plan was not like this. In 4 years, what he wanted to become was not a king who held real power, but a supreme emperor, a hero king who saved the world. To obtain supreme power in such a short period of time, there was only war, only killing and blood, violence and subversion. Let the war come more violently. The throne will grow strong by drinking blood. Joffrey decisively issued instructions to Hannah and the Hound in the Red Keep. Let Renley leave the city. Chapter 70. The Black Raven arrived at the Red Keep even before Robert Baratheon's coffin. That day, all the bells in the city began to toll slowly, the deep ringing echoing throughout King's Landing for a long time. Hundreds of thousands of people stared in astonishment at the bell towers, unable to believe what the booming sounds meant. The king is dead? The gazes people exchanged confirmed the truth. The king is dead. The Great September of Baelor quickly prepared a memorial service for the people to pay their respects, while the High Septon publicly announced that he and the 7 archbishops would pray in the secret chamber for 7 days for King Robert, beseeching the 7 gods for blessings. The plaza in front of the September was instantly packed with people, the compassionate statue of Baelor the Blessed and the tolling of the bells proclaiming their feelings. What mournful bells! People would always remember the peace and tranquility under King Robert's rule, as well as the king's laughter and the magnificent tourneys. Were these days to pass away with the bells? Many people voluntarily mourned for King Robert. Merchants who had black clothes and fabrics in stock made countless coins as a result, their hands unable to keep up, simply throwing the money into piles, which clinked and clattered melodically. People's joys and sorrows are just so different. But no one dared to smile at such a moment. Even if he thought of the happiest thing, even if he secretly missed the rule of the Targaryen family, even if he hated the Iron Throne and all the nobles. After all, the king is dead. The bells tolled incessantly, and people dressed in black clothes and wearing black ribbons poured into the Great September like a tide, then flowed out like a flood. The flood then divided into individuals at a loss. What should they do now? People would either stand there dumbfounded for a while, or shed some tears, sob and sigh a few times, lament for a moment, and ultimately had no choice but to silently return to their positions and continue their daily lives. What else could they do? People had to live on. In just half a day, King Robert's era thus gradually became an irreversible past with people's mourning and departure, becoming an increasingly old piece of history. The king's death was both sensational and quiet. King's Landing seemed to have changed a lot because of this, and yet it seemed that nothing had changed. It seemed to be operating as usual, but undercurrents were surging in the dark. The Red Keep, of course, was still the center of all whirlpools and undercurrents. Not one of the courtiers was not praying in the Red Keep's chapel for the beloved King Robert, praying that the father would judge Robert fairly, praying that the mother would grant mercy, praying for 100 blessings. Their prayers were more formal and longer, but not more sincere than anyone else. They exchanged glances secretly, trying to hide their true thoughts while curiously spying into the hearts of others. The transition between friend and foe was just a matter of a moment. In the glow of the setting sun, Hannah, the acting master of laws, announced the end of the memorial service, and at the same time conveyed the first decree of His Majesty Joffrey I. Make full preparations for the funeral of the late King Robert Baratheon. Prepare for the coronation ceremony. Appoint Tyrion Lannister as Master of Coin. Appoint Hannah as Master of Laws. Appoint Sandor Clegane as Commander of the City Watch of King's Landing. Notify the 7 kingdoms that Regent Duke Tywin, Regent Queen Cersei and Regent and Hand of the King Duke Eddard will act as regents until the king comes of age. All the courtiers knelt down and said respectfully, "Long live His Majesty Joffrey I." Renly forced himself to kneel on the ground and say congratulations. His lifeless expression was not because of sadness, but to hide his inner fear and bewilderment. Stannis is dead, Robert is also dead, am I next? Although there was no evidence, Renly had already determined that the deaths of both were inseparable from the Lannisters. Wasn't it obvious who benefited the most? The Lannisters. Tywin and Cersei are regents, and the imp has also become a master of laws. The Kingslayer can take it one step further at any time. The Red Keep is going to completely belong to the Lannisters. Renly sadly saw the future not long after. The Iron Throne was eroded by lions, and Dragonstone also belonged to Joffrey. After all these years of tossing and turning, all the stag could eventually own was his Storm's End, 300 years of home, no more, no less. Fate really plays tricks on people. And even if he wanted to get this bleak ending, he would have to escape from King's Landing first to make it possible. Renly placed all his hope on Loras. That's right, the Tyrell family is not easy to mess with. The Lannisters are not in King's Landing. These lackeys certainly dare not make decisions on their own. The people of Highgarden will definitely be able to protect my safety, definitely. Renly could only hope so. The courtiers gradually dispersed, and Renly followed the crowd to escape, clinging tightly to Loras. He decided to act tonight. Hannah stood in the chapel, watching Renly's gradually shrinking back. She didn't quite understand His Majesty's plan. Why let Renly go? Even if the Hound has become too conspicuous to carry out an assassination now, others also have a chance of success, at least they should try. But she had long learned to remain silent, obey orders, and just do her duty. She turned to the Hound and said, "Go." The night was already deep. Under the dim firelight, dozens of steeds with thick cloth wrapped around their hooves quietly walked from the stables to the side door of the Red Keep, with armored knights holding their reins beside them. Crack! The sound of the side door opening was not loud, but it was still frightening in the silent night, and even felt like it could be heard by the entire city. Renly and Sear Loras both knew it was an illusion. As long as the action was not leaked, they could quietly leave the Red Keep at any time now, with only one difficult hurdle ahead: the city gate. The plan prepared tonight was simple: leave the Red Keep, exit the city from the Mud Gate, take a boat to the other side of the Blackwater Rush, and then head south along the King's Road to go home. Unfortunately, thanks to the Hound, the Gold Cloaks are much more cautious now. The night defense of each city gate has been increased to 10 squads, and the captains of the guards have also mostly been replaced by more stubborn people, and people who act very stubborn. The captain of the Mud Gate Guard, Iron Hand, was a problem. This guy has wholeheartedly defected to the Hound and the Lannisters, and probably won't let them pass easily. Renly was already prepared to fight. As long as he could get close, dozens of elite knights would be enough to solve those useless gold cloaks, and once out of the city gate, there would be nothing to stop him from going home. The fastest speed, the shortest time, must rush out of the city gate before everyone reacts. After walking a few hundred steps out of the Red Keep, they mounted their horses and headed straight for the Mud Gate at full speed, scaring countless people's dreams along the way. The sound of horses' hooves and armor at night made people dare not get up to observe, and they waited until the sound gradually went away before relaxing slightly, secretly guessing what major event was about to happen and whether it would affect their lives. The knights quickly arrived at Fishmonger's Square, in front of which was the Mud Gate. Renly saw hope. Although the city gate was tightly closed, there was only a squad of gold cloaks warming themselves by the bonfire, with a gold cloak officer standing beside them. No. Renly's heart sank. That officer was not Iron Hand. The Hound signaled the gold cloaks to open the city gate. "Lord Renly is in such a hurry, why didn't you say goodbye to everyone?" Renly looked suspiciously at the increasingly wide crack in the city gate. "Am I asleep, dreaming?" The Hound then stared at Loras. "Why does the Knight of Flowers want to leave the city too? Don't you want to meet His Majesty?" Renly tentatively drove his horse forward, and the Hound didn't move. Renly turned to look at Loras. Loras smiled sadly. "My good lord, you go, it's better for me to stay here." Renly was lost, silent for a long time, and still led half of the Stag House Knights and the team out of the city gate, heading towards the port. Many people watched Renly's back until the city gate closed again. Melisandre extinguished the flames, shaking her head and sighing in disappointment. "It's not you. The blood of the king is on you, but it's not you. The ancient books of Asai predict, after the long summer, the stars will bleed, Azor Ahai will be reborn in the land of smoke and salt, and awaken the dragons from stone. Prince of Prophecy, where are you? Chapter 71. Land of Smoke and Salt. The land of smoke and salt, Dragonstone, surrounded by volcanic shadows and stormy seas, is about to welcome its new master. The harbor teems with people. Nearly 200 warships of the royal fleet are docked, their drums thundering like thunder. Looking out, countless masts are adorned with dazzling golden banners, a sea of gold, as if the crowned stag banner has been planted all over the world. All this is only because of the ordinary merchant ship slowly sailing on the sea. Everyone's eyes closely follow the movement of the merchant ship, watching it enter the dock little by little, drop anchor, and extend the steps for disembarkation. A voice chants, "Welcome Andals, the Roiner and the King of the First Men, ruler of the Seven Kingdoms and protector of the realm, His Majesty Joffrey I of the House Baratheon." The lords of the Narrow Sea immediately knelt on one knee with their retinues, loudly chanting, "Long live His Majesty Joffrey I." Step. Step. Joffrey stepped onto the port, accompanied only by the black-haired Jon and Sear Barristan, in white robe, white armor and white sword. "No need for formalities, rise." Joffrey raised his hand, gazing at each face that was rising. The handsome man with the silver seahorse sigil has long, bright golden hair, from an ancient and proud family, a fallen family, Lord Montfort Velaryon of Driftmark. Behind the banner of 7 gold and 7 pointed stars are the devout followers of the 7 gods, Lord Gunter Sunglass of Sweetport. The old man covered in red crab embroidery exudes an aura of respect and obedience, Lord Ardrian Celtigar of Claw Isle, the red crab. Beneath the blue swordfish sigil is a fat and weak boy, Lord Duran Bar Emin of Sharp Point. And more lesser lords and knights. He saw all the vassals of Dragonstone. Having only been notified 3 days prior, the lords arrived so promptly, at least showing a proper attitude. But the reason he came ahead of the group was not just for the loyalty of these people. Joffrey walked towards Stannis' widow, Celis Florent. "Lady Celis, the death of my uncle is a great blow to us all, but please, you must not fall, even if only for your daughter Shireen. Stannis is dead, and Dragonstone has been granted to me, so why hasn't Celis left? Could it be that she still has delusions about Dragonstone?" Joffrey smiled at the little girl beside her. Shireen immediately shrank timidly behind her mother. Shireen did not have a good impression of this cousin she had never met. Her father and mother had said bad things about her cousin, and that must be true. Lady Celis did not respond, her eyes revealing undisguised vigilance and resistance. The Onion Knight, Davos Seaworth, thanked on behalf of the lady, "His Majesty's sincere concern is truly admirable. Please forgive the lady, she is just too heartbroken, and Miss Shireen is even more saddened, having barely spoken during this time." Joffrey nodded in agreement, "I suppose so. Why not let Shireen return to the Red Keep with me? It's more lively there, with more playmates, enough to gradually offset the sadness in her heart." Shireen clutched her mother's clothes even more tightly. At this time, Lord Velaryon walked over and respectfully asked, "I wonder if His Majesty has any important instructions for this trip. We will certainly do our best." Joffrey glanced at him, "No rush, we'll talk about it at the council in the painted table chamber tonight, but for now." He looked up at the castle on the high ground, a fortress built by Valeria. "You all are probably used to the magnificent scenery of Dragonstone, but this is my first time here, wouldn't you all take me on a tour?" The lords relaxed their expressions and immediately flocked around His Majesty the King, vying to introduce the special features of Dragonstone to His Majesty. It was truly a harmonious and peaceful meeting. Dragonstone's black stone castle is indeed extraordinary. It is inhabited by thousands of gargoyles and long-winged dragon statues, the stone statues several feet tall so lifelike that they seem to come alive at any moment, attacking all living people. Even after hundreds of years of wind and frost, the ferocious stone statues remain intact. Traces such as bird droppings do not affect their defense on the city walls, deterring all enemies who covet this place. Between the stone statues, Joffrey held the city wall and looked at the castle, feeling that what he saw before him were giant dragons with black stone as flesh and blood. The hall is a dragon lying prostrate on the ground, its open jaws are the gate for people to enter and exit. The kitchen is a dragon curled into a ball, its nostrils spewing smoke and steam. Many towers such as the Sea Dragon Tower are stone dragons of varying sizes, either sleeping or raising their heads. Even zooming out further, the entire castle itself is the head and neck of a giant dragon, thus turning Dragonstone into a vast dragon lying in the sea. It's truly a rare miracle in the world. Joffrey couldn't help but sigh. The carving of stone statues can still be piled up with a lot of manpower and skillful techniques, but how was such a huge castle shaped into the shape of a dragon? With this kind of stress structure, can the material strength of black stone support it for so many years? It's too unscientific. Lord Velaryon proudly responded, the great ancient Valyrian freehold built it with magic, each tower was shaped from rock itself, which created such a unique miracle. Unfortunately, the doom came. Lord Sunglass looked pious, praise the seven gods. Valyria should not have angered the gods, it's a pity. Lord Velaryon glared at him. Joffrey pointed to the most unscientific Dragonstone tower, let's go take a look over there. Yes, your majesty. The lords immediately respectfully accepted the order and ran ahead to lead the way for his majesty. Joffrey ignored Lady Celeste's polite refusal, insisted on picking up the little Shireen with red eyes, and strode forward, completely treating Dragonstone as his own home. No one dared to say it wasn't. Everyone understands that His Majesty the King is at least still the Prince of Dragonstone for now, as long as he does not bestow this title, Dragonstone and its vassals will always be His Majesty's private property. Now it seems that His Majesty probably has no intention of bestowing the title. The lords were all considering how they should react. According to the legal system of Duke Stannis, Dragonstone should belong to Miss Shireen. If the tradition of Dragonstone belonging to the heir to the Iron Throne is followed, then it would be Prince Tommen or Duke Renley. If His Majesty seizes it himself, and even merges Dragonstone and the Crownlands from now on. The gale at the top of the Dragonstone tower howled endlessly, showing a gloomy and terrifying atmosphere. The lords stood behind His Majesty, overlooking the angry sea in the distance. Who will be the first to step forward? My lords, I heard that there are many beautiful dragon glass on the island. While it's still light, let's hurry over and take a look, so as not to delay the gathering tonight. Joffrey moved his gaze away from the spire and looked at the lords with respectful faces. There are two faint magical glows on the tower, one familiar and one unfamiliar. There are also huge dragon glass deposits and hot volcanoes underground, truly a treasure land. He sighed, the court needs someone to preside over it too much, I can only stay on Dragonstone for one day. The Onion Knight bowed and said, dragon glass is currently not being mined, there are only some abandoned mines on the island, please forgive His Majesty. Joffrey smiled, it doesn't matter. It's good that it's dilapidated. It's more neat and clean to rectify it. The lords repeatedly agreed. Why does it sound like he's not talking about dragon glass? Chapter 72, The Storm in the Map Room. The sea churned. A storm suddenly descended. The boundless dark sea stubbornly crashed against the jagged Dragonstone island from below, while the sky poured down an endless stream of silver rain, vowing to submerge everything on the surface. The castle became both quiet and violent. The bonfires, statues, and human figures were swallowed by the Lord of Darkness, and the sounds of speech, footsteps, and horns were obscured by the storm god scattering rain. What could be seen? Shadows, shadows, and more shadows. What could be heard? The wind laughed wildly, the rain sang loudly, the sea roared, and the castle groaned, but there was no human voice to be heard. Suddenly, the darkness flashed for a moment. The bright, blinding light pierced the heart, proclaiming the supreme divine power. People sincerely appreciated the gentle light bestowed by the gods on ordinary days. Boom! The suppressed, deep, and heavy thunder mercilessly shook people's hearts and souls. The sky roared in anger. No matter how many times they experienced it, the power of the storm still allowed humans to see their own insignificance. People trembled and hid deep within the castle, away from the light, wind, rain, and sounds, like earthworms burrowing into the ground. However, the map room, which stood at the highest point of the main castle, was an exception. It still contained candlelight and human figures. The storm is getting bigger and bigger. Your Majesty, let's move to another place to discuss matters, Onion Knight said, looking worriedly at little Shireen. Joffrey closed his eyes and listened. The rumbling sound echoed incessantly within the stone walls. Dragonstone's main castle was called Stone Drum Tower, and it was said that its ancient walls would rumble whenever a storm came. It lived up to its name. Another bolt of lightning flashed across the sky, and the light shone through the 4 high windows into the map room, instantly making the candlelight almost non-existent. He opened his eyes. The detailed map of Westeros was carved on the 20-meter-long map table in front of him, and the position of the high platform under his seat corresponded exactly to Dragonstone. Once upon a time, Aegon the Conqueror sat here overlooking the entire Westeros. He raised his eyes. The earls and their subordinates stood quietly in various parts of the hall, waiting for instructions. What respectful and obedient vassals they were. Joffrey smiled. The storm is not my enemy. Listen, it's welcoming me. The storm beat against the closed high windows and stone walls. The people looked at each other, but the constantly flashing light prevented them from seeing each other's expressions clearly. Have you all forgotten? Joffrey pointed to the harbor. Decades ago, the last Targaryen fleet was torn apart by a violent storm here. Daenerys was even named Stormborn because of this. Does she take this as an honor? Why don't we make a bet? I guess today's storm won't harm the royal fleet. What do you say? Joffrey scanned the crowd. I support your majesty. Earl Seaworth of Crack Claw Point seemed to shout with all his strength, but the sound the crowd heard was still slightly weak. The little Earl of Sharp Point was the second to stand up. May the storm favor your majesty. The rest of the people had no choice but to echo. Joffrey sighed. That's boring. Isn't there anyone who objects? No one dared to answer. Then let's start the meeting. It's better to finish it early, so as not to make Sir Davos wait anxiously. He stretched out his right hand, and a roll of parchment was handed out from the shadows behind him. Everyone stared as the scroll was unrolled circle by circle. Joffrey opened it and looked at it, then handed the parchment to his left. Jon, let the adults take a look at this news. The black-haired bastard walked out of the shadows and passed the scroll to everyone in the hall in order. Earl Velaryon couldn't help but exclaim, Lord Renley is suspected of participating in the murder of His Majesty Robert and Duke Stannis. He has fled King's Landing. How is this possible? The pious Earl Sunglass looked serious. If this is true, Renley, who has committed the crime of kinslaying, will not be tolerated by the seven gods. His only ending is to fall into the seven hells after death. The other lords and knights also argued endlessly about this. Joffrey clapped his hands, and the hall immediately quieted down. I don't want to believe it either. But Uncle Renly did leave King's Landing quietly at night, without planning to see me again. Why? Why? Everyone looked at the young king. Joffrey's face flickered uncertainly in the lightning. Everyone, if that day really comes, are you willing to defend the legitimate inheritance of the royal family and fight for the monarch to whom you swore allegiance? There was only one answer. All the figures knelt down together. It would be an honor. Joffrey stood up from the high platform. Good. With everyone's support for the royal family, Uncle Renly will definitely calm down and save the Seven Kingdoms from the threat of war. I order, he looked at several earls. Each 40 warships of the Dragonstone port fleet shall be divided into a sub-fleet. The first fleet will sail to Storm's End to persuade Uncle Renly to return to the palace. The second fleet will clear Blackwater Bay and the Narrow Sea Waterway. The third fleet will return to King's Landing with me, specializing in guarding the Blackwater River and King's Landing port. The fourth fleet will remain stationed at Dragonstone. The position of Commander-in-Chief of the Royal Fleet is temporarily vacant and will be rewarded based on merit in the future. Joffrey's tone was firm. Everyone, decide now, which fleet do you want to be the commander of? Everyone held their breath. Fleet Commander. Joffrey took out a crystal ball and placed it on the map table at the location of Blackwater Bay. The surging light magic energy was suddenly activated, and a round of white sun rose on the eastern sea of the Westeros continent on the table, casting a huge shadow outline on the curved stone wall. Everyone's eyes were focused on the map, and every place was clearly visible. Here was the Vale with its crisscrossing valleys, there was the Westerlands with its mountains full of gold and silver, the vast north, the fertile Reach, the arid Dorne, the coastal Stormlands. Standing on Dragonstone was His Majesty, the King of the Seven Kingdoms of Westeros. His Majesty smiled faintly. It was too dark just now. That's the only bad thing about the storm. Now it's much clearer. Let's continue. Earl Velaryon stepped forward and bowed down. Supernatural power, the power of the Valyrian freehold. His face was filled with unstoppable excitement and shock. Your Majesty, I am willing to be the commander of the First Fleet, to fight for you at Storm's End and bring back Renly Baratheon. Earl Sunglass prayed sincerely to the seven gods, and then knelt down to request an order. I am willing to be the commander of the Second Fleet, to sweep the seas for your Majesty. The elderly Earl Seaworth was about to speak, but Davos rushed in front of Joffrey first. Your Majesty, will Miss Shireen return to the Red Keep with you? Joffrey nodded. Davos immediately prostrated himself on the ground. I beg your majesty to allow me to join the Third Fleet. I swear by all my honor and reputation that I will definitely offer eternal loyalty. Never waver. Joffrey walked down the high platform and helped up the Onion Knight, then you will be the commander of the Third Fleet. Do a good job in the future. Earl Seaworth, Earl Baelmond, Joffrey walked over and patted the old man and the boy on the shoulders. The responsibility of staying behind at Dragonstone is heavy. You must discuss matters together and ask for instructions often. The Red Keep is not too far away anyway. Yes, your majesty. The meeting ended, and everyone withdrew from the map room. Lady Celis, who was waiting anxiously outside, immediately rushed in. Shireen. She immediately hugged her daughter, then looked at Joffrey angrily. Your majesty, have you decided how to deal with our mother and daughter? Joffrey was not anxious or annoyed. I am confident that I can cure Shireen's grayscale disease. Naturally, I will take her with me when I set off tomorrow. Madam wouldn't have the heart to watch Shireen continue to be tormented by illness, would you? Celis couldn't believe it. Cure grayscale. I never lie. Joffrey turned to look at the storm outside the window. King's Landing and the Red Keep have changed, and they will get better and better. I believe Shireen and you will like it. Chapter 73, King's Landing. June in King's Landing was so extraordinary. First, King Robert died, and the city was filled with the tolling of bells. His Majesty's coffin was sent to the Great September of Baelor yesterday, and today the harbour welcomed a mighty fleet. Fortunately, the sails bore the huge crowned stag. The people by the river curiously looked towards the harbour. The largest berth in the harbour had been cleared. The gold cloaks stood guard on both sides like statues, and the middle was filled with dignified and wealthy figures. Even the servants and maids seemed unattainable. The people then knew, and they looked at the warship docking. The first thing that came into view was the valiant young man wearing a crown, and the cute and ordinary little girl beside him. His Supreme Majesty, the King, arrived in his loyal King's Landing today. Long live His Majesty! Joffrey enthusiastically helped up Lord Eddard, who was about to bow. Lord Eddard, there's no need to be so polite. We're family, no need for such formalities. He immediately asked, Father has been buried in the September. The Prime Minister nodded silently. Joffrey looked regretful. If it weren't for Uncle Renley's matter, there would have been no need to make a special trip to Dragonstone, which prevented me from seeing my father one last time. Was it really Renley? Eddard tilted his head slightly, and the little girl in front of him immediately caught his attention. Your Majesty, is this Shireen? Eddard asked hesitantly. Although he had never met her, he had heard about the tragic experience of Stannis's only daughter in her childhood. Although the deadly grayscale did not kill the child, the terrifying, grey-black dead skin had permanently taken over the girl's face. Could it all be rumors? Shireen lifted the corner of her skirt gracefully and saluted. Lord Eddard, Shireen sends her greetings. She tried her best to show her sincerity. Grayscale was difficult to endure, but your and my father's honourable deeds once made me forget the pain. I also want to thank His Majesty for the treatment. Everything is in the past now. Shireen gave a big smile. Eddard looked at Joffrey. Joffrey smiled without saying a word and beckoned everyone to return to the city. Shireen's symptoms were already considered mild. At least her whole body didn't turn to stone and go crazy. The treatment wasn't too difficult. He had Shireen drink a sedative potion, cut off the tissues ravaged by grayscale, and the recovered magical energy successfully produced fresh, normal flesh. Only one thing was very concerning. Joffrey recalled the scene during the treatment. Grayscale, it seemed, was not just an ordinary disease. The familiar violin and bugle melodies entered his ears. Joffrey was stunned. Tyrion walked over and saluted respectfully. His Majesty named this piece King's Landing. King Robert loved it very much. How can we not play this piece today as we enter the city? Joffrey smiled with emotion. Yes, since father loved it, of course I will carry it on. Carrying it on is good. Carrying it on means stability. The courtiers seemed to hear a promise and immediately praised His Majesty's filial piety. But they all forgot one thing. Robert Baratheon loved war the most. Rain came over, Joffrey touched its head, and stepped onto the lion's back to enter the city gate. The impassioned music was still echoing. The people watched the young king and the giant lion gallop towards the Red Keep perched on the hill, and suddenly realized that King's Landing had welcomed a new king, and the old era had completely ended. The new King's Landing. The evening glow was brilliant. The hound brought 2 heavy wooden boxes for His Majesty. Joffrey sat leisurely in the king's study, flipping through the mountain of outdated reports. Either they were crying poor, or complaining about the lack of manpower, or explaining why they failed to complete the task. There were very few good reports. Looking at these alone, who would have thought that the royal family had supported itself in this state for more than 10 years, and on the surface, everything was still normal, which was a miracle. He looked at the slightly shaking wooden box beside the hound's hand. A man-made miracle. Sandor, what are you waiting for? The country is in crisis, quickly announce the arrival of the 2 lords. He said jokingly. The hound looked at the wooden box. Although these days had passed, every time the half-person high wooden box shook, his heart trembled with it. He once thought that being burned by flames was the greatest torture, but who knew that there could be such purgatory methods in the world? Sure enough, people who play politics have no heart. The hound grinned and opened the front cover of the wooden box, and 2 familiar faces were in the box. Joffrey threw away the report in his hand. Lord Varys, Lord Peter, why are you crying? Could it be that you are also saddened by father's death? Tyrion sighed and looked away. The world has finally given birth to someone shorter than me. The 2 half-bodied men, amputated from the shoulders and the roots of their thighs, wriggled their non-existent limbs in the wooden box, but could only make the wooden box tremble slightly. How could they not cry? Littlefinger reacted more strongly than Varys. He once had so many trump cards, countless plans and strategies, and the lofty ambitions he had struggled for all his life. But now, all of these were buried in the soil with his hands, feet, and lower body, and turned into a delicious meal for insects and ants. I don't even have an heir yet. The culprit was right in front of him. Littlefinger barely calmed down and opened his mouth. Joffrey, you. The hound kicked over the wooden box, and Littlefinger almost bit off his tongue. Varys squeezed out a flattering smile. Your Majesty, I am already an incomplete person. My hands and feet were my last comfort. Please return them to me. Joffrey chuckled and said, I can even let you be a man again. However, Lord Varys, what will you use to exchange for it? Use that fake Aegon? Are you willing to part with it? Can you do it? What? Varys shook his head and wailed. How could he know about Aegon? Have I been completely exposed? Joffrey walked to the front of the wooden box and squatted down. Don't say he's fake, even if he's a real Targaryen prince, so what? Let him come, war will add glory to the throne. Varys could not see a trace of weakness or hesitation in those eyes, only endless flames. Tyrion handed a drawing to him. The explored secret passages of the Red Keep are all here, Lord Varys, do you see if there are any omissions? Not one was missed. Varys closed his eyes. Joffrey motioned for the hound to help up Littlefinger's wooden box. Varys, Peter, be glad that you are rare smart people. Starting tomorrow, I will put you on both sides of the throne and look forward to your advice. Work hard. 100 useful pieces of advice for one hand or foot, 200 for a man's dignity. Varys and Peter couldn't help but calculate how long it would take. Joffrey waved his hand. The half-bodied men in the box were immediately terrified and kept begging. The hound ruthlessly closed the wooden box and sent them back to the dark and silent storage box in the distance. Joffrey sat back on the throne and sipped his wine. Tyrion said bitterly, Littlefinger really deserves it. What has he done to the national treasury? How can other ministers of finance do their job? The situation was worse than expected. The royal family's foreign debt was as high as 6.5 million gold dragons, and the annual daily expenditure was 1 million gold dragons, but the actual annual income was only more than 1.3 million. Various taxes in various places were in arrears to varying degrees. Littlefinger was naturally guilty, but the courtiers and lords were also looming in it, even including the Westerlands and the North. How should we deal with it? The hideous and sharp iron throne was not easy to sit on, in every sense. Joffrey checked the invisible runes in his mind. 1, 2, a total of 20. It's time to change the way the throne is sat on. Chapter 74, The Dazzling Iron Throne. The trial in the throne room began. The Master of Laws, Hannah, spoke first. Peter Baelish, Varys, do you still refuse to confess to the murder of King Robert? Everyone looked at the 2 half-men placed in the middle of the hall. Without a doubt, without help, Lord Peter and Lord Varys couldn't move a step. Food and water were a luxury even when right in front of them. These were true half-men. How cruel! Plop! Littlefinger suddenly fell face first onto the hard stone floor. Varys felt a pang of sorrow. Without the support of the fixed wooden box, even moving his neck could topple his entire body. He could only carefully turn his eyes to survey his surroundings. Directly in front of him, the Iron Throne cast a cold, giant shadow. The king on the throne was expressionless. Queen Mother Cersei and Duke Eddard sat to the left and right of the Iron Throne, respectively. The King's Guard, Jaime Lannister and Meryn Trant, stood guard on either side. Closer to him, at the council table, were Tyrion, Pycelle, Barry Stan, Hannah, the Hound, and other members of the small council. Varys knew that the humble maid Hannah had already taken his place. Master of Laws, it sounded more legitimate than Master of Whisperers. Varys pleaded in a trembling voice, Your Majesty, my lords, look at my condition. Did I not anticipate such punishment at all? The courtiers remained silent. Varys and Littlefinger had completely failed, and their past relationships and promises were naturally null and void. It's Bloodraven. Varys's words were filled with hatred. Thanks to His Majesty's insight, I finally learned the name of this insidious villain. He controlled my body and mind, I am no match for him. The fallen Littlefinger struggled to expose his mouth, it is him. How can mortals resist such evil power? Joffrey quietly watched the reactions of the people below. Tyrion chuckled, You don't think you can escape responsibility by making up a story, do you? Who knows if it's true or false, Bloodraven may not even exist. My lords, am I right? Several courtiers nodded slowly, but were quickly reminded by those next to them, and hurriedly lowered their heads to admire the exquisite floor tiles, not daring to react in any way. Bloodraven must exist. Bloodraven must exist. Otherwise, how did King Robert die? Varys argued again, I have seen those children. Children of the forest. They know how terrible Bloodraven is. Your Majesty, let them say a few words. The Hound looked at the throne and waved his hand at the gold cloaks guarding the entrance to the small hall. 3 chestnut-haired sprites walked out of the slowly opening passage. Good heavens! The children of the forest are real. Gods have mercy, what a miraculous creation! The courtiers exclaimed in shock, losing their composure, even though this was not the first time some of them had seen the children of the forest. Littlefinger immediately pleaded loudly, My lords, please ask these little sprites how many conspiracies Bloodraven has, which loyal ministers he has murdered, and how many good and kind people his evil power has controlled. Everyone looked at the children of the forest with curiosity, and the hall fell silent. Leaf's voice was as beautiful as a song. Oh, the suffering and obsessed old man. He once entered the tall human Gregor, strangling infants and queens. He once entered the small human Peter, stealing gold dragons and loyalty. He once entered the crippled human Varys, concealing news and danger. He once entered the proud human Renley, stirring ambition and desire. The singer discovered him, and thus came to the south. The mournful and natural song echoed in the hall for a long time, intoxicating people without them knowing it. Loras broke the silent atmosphere, impossible. Lord Renley is not such a person. He has never done anything evil or shameful. The courtiers belonging to Highgarden either immediately voiced their support, or hesitated, wondering if it was appropriate to speak now. The other courtiers didn't say a word. The Hound mocked, Well said, Knight of Flowers. Are you representing the entire Tyrell family of Highgarden, or are you just speaking for your lover? Loras glared at the Hound, his face red. Joffrey's voice was calm, There is no need to argue. Earl Velaryon has already sailed to Storm's End to invite Uncle Renley back to court. The truth will be revealed in the future. Today, the trial is the main focus. Does anyone else have any questions? Loras reluctantly retreated to the ranks. No one else stood up. Joffrey stood up, announced the verdict. The regent and the members of the small council also stood up from their seats. The courtiers knelt on one knee, with their hands on their chests and their heads bowed. Inform the 7 kingdoms that the mastermind Bloodraven Brynden Rivers is guilty of treason and rebellion. A reward of 10,000 gold dragons will be given to whoever captures the criminal, dead or alive. The accomplices Varys and Peter Baelish are somewhat excusable. They are to be stripped of all positions, wealth, rights, and honors, and placed near the throne day and night to offer advice, to atone for their sins. There may still be a day of forgiveness. The courtiers shouted in unison, Long live His Majesty. Joffrey sat down again, accidentally touching a sharp iron thorn. The solid magic energy was consumed a little. The courtiers stood respectfully, waiting to leave. Tyrion cleared his throat. My lords, don't rush. I have a difficult problem here, let's discuss it together. There was still content after the trial. This was only the first day, His Majesty seemed to be too diligent. The courtiers felt a sense of foreboding. Tyrion opened the ledger and read, the total debt of the national treasury is approximately 6,523,000 gold dragons. 3,200,000 to the Lannister family, 1,300,000 to the Iron Bank of Bravos, 700,000 to the Church, 600,000 to the Tyrell family, 540,000 to the Tyroji Trading Company, as well as interest, losses, penalties for breach of contract, etc. Last year, the national treasury's income was approximately 1,310,000 gold dragons, and the expenditure was approximately 1,002,000 gold dragons. My lords, this is still a time of peace, what if there is an urgent need for money? The situation is not optimistic. Tyrion sighed and glanced at the courtiers, every face was lowered so that their expressions could not be seen. Which lord has a solution? Please speak. The hall was as silent as a graveyard. Cersei finally couldn't help but scold, is the national treasury in such a bad state? What have you been doing all this time? Joffrey tried to bend a rusty sword blade on his right hand. Prime Minister Eddar's voice was low, Your Majesty, calm down. The national treasury is already so empty, the most urgent thing is how to reverse the situation. The courtiers remained silent. They were only serving the throne in the court, and the affairs they were responsible for were not fixed, mostly temporary assignments. As long as they didn't speak out of turn, the responsibility for the national treasury would not fall on them no matter what. Tyrion said, I have a way. Everyone's eyes focused on the imp. What method could save such a precarious situation? My lords should know, right? The total amount of taxes collected in various places is as high as 1,500,000 gold dragons, but unfortunately, it has not been fully collected for many years. The tax system of the Seven Kingdoms is not unified. The lords of the Crownlands and other royal territories directly pay taxes to the Iron Throne, or are collected by personnel designated by the royal family. The other lords of the Seven Kingdoms have autonomous taxation, but they must also pay allegiance to the throne according to the agreed proportion or amount. However, this agreement was not strictly enforced from the beginning. Even the Targaryen Dragon Kings only symbolically received some gifts and tributes, and would not seriously care. This was already an unspoken rule. But now, almost everyone was stunned at the same time. Provoking all the lords, how dare he? Without the support of the lords, even the Iron Throne will become rusty scrap iron. The sunlight suddenly became redder and brighter. Hiss, so hot. The people near the Iron Throne ran away the fastest, including the King's Guard and the Regent. Everyone looked at the Iron Throne from a distance. His Majesty was still sitting there calmly, as if the hot air was just everyone's illusion. Send a message to every castle, make up all the outstanding taxes within 3 years, and the past will be forgiven. If you can't do it, hand over the territory to someone more qualified. The Iron Throne under His Majesty was completely red hot, and the steel was melting and flowing. How dazzling! Chapter 75 Divine Grace. Beneath the statues of the Seven in the Red Keep, September, Loras Tyrell and the other 99 were waiting. Half of them were scions of the great houses of the Seven Kingdoms, the other half were withdrawn youths draped in white cloth, found from who knows where. The two groups were incongruous, as if they shouldn't exist in the same world. Loras silently asked himself, what does Joffrey want? What makes him think he can stand against the lords of the Seven Kingdoms? Does he believe a melted Iron Throne is enough to make everyone bow down and submit? At least Loras had no intention of yielding. Even so, Loras couldn't help but recall those fiery rivers of molten steel. The air still seemed scorching and dry, every breath filled with the scent of blood and fire. In his days, he imagined his ancestors facing the breath of the Targaryen dragons on the battlefield. Fire and blood. His ancestors had become the liege lords and dukes of the Reach in the aftermath of the Field of Fire. Fire and blood. This maxim of House Baratheon, inherited from the Storm Kings, had also become the most perfect annotation of the Dragon King's heroic bearing. Had Renley safely returned to Storm's End? Had the lords of the Stormlands already taken up arms? The Valyrian fleet would not be able to prevent the outbreak of war. When that time came, even with the support of Eddard and Duke Tywin, could Joffrey obtain the full allegiance of the lords of the North and the Westerlands? Not after behaving so arrogantly and conceitedly. Storm's End and Highgarden had at least a 50-50 chance of winning. But was Joffrey truly unaware of these unfavorable circumstances? Loras suddenly remembered the dragon eggs in Joffrey's possession, and a startling conjecture was born in his heart: could he hatch new dragons? Guarded by 2 knights in white armor, Joffrey entered from the September's entrance. "Your Grace," the crowd greeted in unison. "Do you know why I've summoned you?" Joffrey stood beneath the statue of the father. Loras saw the fanatical glee overflowing on the faces of the youths draped in white cloth, as if they were about to receive an incomparable boon, and he felt even more uneasy. "Accept the gifts of fate. The gods have chosen me to fulfill a sacred mission, and I have chosen you to be messengers who spread light and the glory of the gods to the world. Know that the scourge of frost has arrived, the eternal night of the apocalypse is approaching, and you are the vanguard of salvation. Light eternal." The white-robed youths prostrated themselves reverently on the ground. The scions of the great houses were at a loss, looking at each other, and in the end, they had no choice but to reluctantly lie on the ground and pretend. Loras almost thought he was facing a charlatan trying to scam a meal. But then he saw Joffrey extend his left hand. In his palm was a pile of small, dark, glittering discs. What was this? "Come forward, and share in the great power of the gods, this is divine grace." All the white-robed youths instantly surged forward, more crazed than mindless fanatics, more greedy than beasts starved for 4 or 5 days, more oblivious to everything else than soldiers in the heat of battle. Joffrey gently soothed, one at a time. The white-robed youths immediately quieted down, forming a neat and orderly line, but their expressions were even more eager and excited than servants lining up to receive a reward. The nervous and flustered scions of the great houses gradually walked to the end of the line. Loras was about in the middle. He looked up at the very front. Joffrey was holding a Valyrian steel dagger and cutting open the back of the white-robed youth's neck, but that youth didn't even move. Joffrey pinched up a small glittering disc and inserted it between the youth's flesh and bones. "So that's how it's used." Loras felt a chill in his heart. Is this thing going to be buried in my neck too? Is it safe? How much of an impact will it have on combat? Loras resisted from the bottom of his heart. He nudged Hobart Hightower in front of him. Hobart turned around. Loras raised his chin in Joffrey's direction, shook his head, and stared intently into Hobart's eyes. Hobart understood Loras's meaning. "But ask me to step forward and disrupt the arrangements of the newly enthroned king? Those who have newly seized power are especially not to be disobeyed." Even the simplest questions could be interpreted as malicious provocation. The tragic state of Littlefinger and the Iron Throne was still fresh in his mind, and Hobart didn't think the Red Wine Fleet far away in the Reach could allow him to do whatever he wanted in the Red Keep. Besides, he hadn't seen any danger yet. It even sounded like a great thing. Hobart turned to face forward. Joffrey wiped the youth's neck with one hand, and the exposed wound immediately closed, as if nothing had ever happened. Magical power, the mission of the gods. Progress was going smoothly, and Joffrey continued to cut open the next person's neck with satisfaction. The small discs were the magic net core made of dragon crystal, which contained a one-time contract magic energy and enough information magic energy to support the panel's operation for 2 weeks. The instructions were more complete and rich, and Joffrey named it Divine Grace Generation 1 Core. Combining the actual situation of this world, Joffrey put a shining and righteous skin on the magic net, just to make people speechless. Divine grace, who can refuse? In order to achieve the most sensational and shocking effect, Joffrey also prepared the power of flame or healing for the first batch of 100 divine grace beneficiaries. Fire runes and recovery runes are the most suitable for popularization, both practical and energy-saving. After all, the birth of these 2 runes requires 6 rune energies, and the rune mirror image only needs 3 rune energies. 1 sowing, 3 days to break even, and then lie down and earn. The snowball will get bigger and bigger, and the initial size of the snowball also affects the speed of the snowball's growth, which is why Joffrey is anxious to create 100 mages at once. Preparing 300 rune energies is actually quite troublesome. He can only store up to 100 rune energies in his body. The excess rune energies can only be made into magic props and stored indirectly. He can then absorb the rune energies in the props to create runes or rune mirror images when needed. Joffrey could clearly feel the weight of the dozens of steel pieces in his arms. The magic on the steel pieces was dissipating one by one. Finally, it was the first scion of the great house's turn. Joffrey nodded with satisfaction. "Samwell Tarly, you're quite enthusiastic." Sam's round face barely squeezed out a smile. The process of accepting divine grace looked extremely terrifying. How could he voluntarily be the first to go up? Wasn't he forced to buy those guys? Sam watched helplessly as the sharp blade approached his neck. No, I'm done for. Sam closed his eyes tightly, trembling like a fat rooster about to be slaughtered. Joffrey had no choice but to expend mental power to take over his body, and only then did he successfully complete the implantation of the Divine Grace core. Half a day later, the 100 people were still unable to calm down in the September. Loras only felt as if he was being burned by a raging fire, as hot as bathing in dragon flame, but he was actually fine. I'm still alive. Divine Grace has been bestowed, and the mission can no longer be shirked. Is your destination the 7 heavens or the 7 hells? Fight to the death for the gods. King Joffrey, beneath the statue of the Father, proclaimed the will of the gods. Loras stared intently at the faint blue light screen in front of him, with rows of words and numbers on it. He was already a Divine Grace beneficiary, a Holy War Army trainee soldier, and a Lightbringer trainee member. The king raised his arms. Gentlemen, cheer, cheer for all enemies, we will win countless victories. Return to the kingdom of heaven filled with glory. Light eternal. It wasn't just the youths draped in white cloth who let out wild howls. Loras desperately thought of his beloved, the son that seemed destined to be shot down. My Renley, what are you doing? Stop it quickly. Chapter 76. Black Stag and White Stag. Your Grace, greetings from Lord Montfort Velaryon of Driftmark at Sea. Sir Courtenay Penrose presented a letter. Renley took the letter, glanced at it, and tossed it onto the desk with a chuckle. Young Lord Velaryon is quite arrogant, thinking that 40 warships will make the lords of the Stormlands obedient. Renley walked to the window and looked down at the sea, dozens of ship shadows huddled together, both powerful and insignificant. Ignore him. Velaryon may have forgotten the origin of the name Storm's End. The stones and the storms will greet his invincible fleet for us. Everyone knows the legend of Storm's End. The ballad tells that the daughter of the sea god and the goddess of the wind, Ynyr, fell in love with the human Durin. She resolutely gave up her long life and chose to spend a short but happy life with Durin. However, Ynyr's father and mother were furious and gave their daughter's wedding seawater and storms as gifts. The gift was too heavy. Durin's castle collapsed, and none of his family and guests survived. Only Ynyr and Durin, protected by her, saw the calm ruins afterward. Durin and Ynyr did not give in. They repaired the castle, and the gods once again brought storms. Then they built new castles, each more solid and taller than the last, again and again. Until someone helped them with magic, the castle finally successfully resisted the storms and the sea's invasion. This castle was then named Storm's End, and Durin became the first Storm King, ruling over the vast territory of the Stormlands. All that was thousands of years ago, in the Age of Dawn. Storm's End has never been breached. Courtenay Penrose looked puzzled. Lord Velaryon is aboard the Glory of Driftmark, which is Velaryon's largest warship. Why is he so diligent? Renley returned to his seat. Perhaps Lord Velaryon is just sincerely serving the king. His dear majesty has not returned Dragonstone to Little Shireen. Renley was not so naive. Montfort Velaryon must have felt that Joffrey was sure to win, so he dared to bet so heavily. After all, when he set sail, Joffrey had not yet issued that absurd order. Renley almost couldn't help laughing. Sir Courtenay, the Iron Throne's decree has been read for a week. What is the total amount of taxes owed by Storm's End? Courtenay Penrose shook his head and clicked his tongue. It's hard to imagine. If calculated from the Targaryen period, even selling the entire Stormlands would not be enough to repay. Even if calculated from the year of King Robert's ascension, the tax arrears have already reached 1.6 million gold dragons. Renley couldn't help but cheer for his opponent inwardly. The situation in the Stormlands is already so bad, the other 6 kingdoms must be even worse. Joffrey only gave 3 years. At that time, could the lords and dukes of the 7 kingdoms offer such a huge fortune? Which duke can take money from the family treasury to subsidize this bottomless pit? If they pursue taxes from their subordinate lords, it will inevitably lead to various contradictions, weakening their own prestige and power, which is harmful and unprofitable. Even if Eddard Stark and Duke Tywin still fully support him, will their lords obey the Iron Throne without reservation? Renley knew that the scales of victory had tilted greatly towards his side, waiting for the largest weight to fall, and the scales would completely fall to his side. The Baratheons will reclaim the Iron Throne. Loras, I'm just making you suffer. Renley tried his best to hide his inner anxiety. It's been 2 weeks, has the Reach not replied yet? But Courtenay Penrose still felt the Duke's impatience. The Duke had asked 3 times today alone. Knock knock knock. A clear knock suddenly sounded. Sear Courtenay went to check and returned to Renley's side with a look of joy. Your Grace, the seal of the rose. Renley immediately took it over and carefully examined it. That's right, the blooming golden rose pattern was exquisite and familiar to the point of being unforgettable. The liege lord of the most fertile reach in the 7 kingdoms. House Tyrell. Renley took a deep breath, carefully opened the wax seal, and unfolded the scroll to read silently. To Duke Renley of Storm's End, Governor of the Stormlands, Master of Laws, of House Baratheon. The Tyrells and all loyal subjects of the Reach vow to uphold the lawful succession of the Iron Throne. If the bloodline of King Joffrey I is in doubt, the lords of the 7 kingdoms should not be afraid to question and bravely take responsibility to clarify the truth. The Tyrells are willing to be pioneers. Respectfully, Willis Tyrell. Willis Tyrell, the eldest son of Duke Tyrell, the heir to Highgarden. Renley was both satisfied and regretful. How good it would be if Duke Mace Tyrell and the Queen of Thorns jointly expressed their position. Renley shook his head again. No, if the Tyrell family was really so reckless, it would not be worth relying on. This is enough for now. The biggest weight has already been placed on the scales. Renley stood up. The battlefield will be south of King's Landing and Casterly Rock, north of Highgarden and Storm's End. 3 months is the limit. The north is the farthest and can only send 20,000 troops at most. The Riverlands and the Vale each have 20,000 to 30,000. The Westerlands have 40,000 to 50,000. The Crownlands are the closest, and it is possible to arm 10,000 to 20,000 soldiers. But with Joffrey's decree to collect taxes, it would be good if the lords could send some miscellaneous soldiers as a token. Old Hoster of the Riverlands is about to die, and Lisa of the Vale is a neurotic madwoman. The 2 places will most likely only protect themselves. Dorne and the Iron Islands have no goodwill towards the Lannisters. At best, Joffrey can have 50,000 troops. The Stormlands alone have 20,000 to 30,000 troops. As long as the Reach sends more than 50,000, this battle to win back the Iron Throne will be devastating. The enemy may even defect before the battle. Renley seemed to have already seen the courtiers under the Iron Throne swear allegiance to him. Sear Courtenay, summon all the lords of the Stormlands, gather troops at Storm's End, and prepare for battle. Also, send this letter to every castle in the 7 kingdoms, including the Red Keep. Sear Courtenay took the parchment without a wax seal. He only glanced at it and immediately froze. Your Grace, Joffrey, he. Renley smiled. Sear, I am His Majesty now. You didn't see it wrong. Joffrey, Tommen, and Myrcella are all products of incest. According to all the laws of gods and men, the Iron Throne should be inherited by me. Yes. Your Majesty. His Majesty's eyes were so hot and sharp that Sear Courtenay couldn't help but look away. The banner hanging on the wall came into view. On the golden background of the banner is the coat of arms inherited from the ancient Storm Kings, the symbol of House Baratheon for 300 years, a raging fire, a crowned stag. The Black Stag. Under the crowned stag banner of the Red Keep, Hannah brought good news to King Joffrey. Hunters have discovered a pure white stag in the Kingswood. Congratulations, Your Majesty. This must be an auspicious sign bestowed by the gods for tomorrow's coronation. Joffrey said indifferently, a reward of 100 gold dragons. Rain is getting more and more crazy. It's time to change a mount. The war is about to spread. The coronation ceremony is a good opportunity. King's Landing will begin to be reborn tomorrow, and Westeros will achieve a magical empire in the guise of religion. Azor Ahai, the hero king. Where is Melisandre, the priestess of Arhillar from Asai? Hannah remembered her. She lives in an inn next to the Mud Gate. Does Your Majesty want to summon her? Joffrey smiled. After tomorrow, Melisandre will come to his door on her own. Chapter 77. Azor Ahai. The Red Priestess Melisandre closed her eyes and prayed silently. Lord of Light, Heart of Holy Flame, Master of Shadows and Fire, let me see the prince in the prophecy, your agent in the world. The air was extremely hot, and her lips were already chapped. This was not surprising. Since she moved into this room in the hotel, the flames in the fireplace had never gone out, even though the summer sun was shining in at this moment. Undoubtedly, the priest of the Lord of Light must coexist with the flames. She knew that Arhillar, the Lord of Light, used ashes and flickering flames as language to convey omens to the believers he had chosen. And she was best at watching and interpreting ambiguous omens from the sacred fire. She opened her eyes and stared at the flames. Before her, flickering phantoms swayed in the flames. Faces and figures were erratic. One phantom took shape, then began to dissolve, gradually fading into another. The colors were sometimes golden, sometimes scarlet, and sometimes bright white. The shapes were sometimes strange, sometimes terrifying, sometimes bewitching, and sometimes holy. She couldn't see the prince in the prophecy clearly. Failed again. Melisandre tried to forget the disappointment and confusion in her heart. She sat blankly in front of the sacred fire of the Lord of Light. The ancient books of Asai prophesied, after the long summer, the stars will bleed, Azor Ahai will be reborn in a place of smoke and salt, and awaken the dragon from the stone. Melisandre firmly believed that the place of smoke and salt was Dragonstone. Therefore, she trekked from Asai and joined Stannis, expecting to guide the prince in the prophecy to complete the mission bestowed by the Lord of Light. But Stannis is dead. Melisandre had to accept the reality. She might have misinterpreted the prophecy. She didn't know where to go. But Dragonstone soon received news that Joffrey Baratheon, the heir to the Iron Throne, had become the Prince of Dragonstone. After that, envoys from the Iron Throne carrying dragon eggs stayed on Dragonstone. She woke up. She had come too early. Stannis was just a vanguard for the king, and the real prince was in King's Landing. So she came to King's Landing again, spreading the gospel of the Lord of Light to the ignorant people, and even saw the new king's face, but the sacred fire had been silent. Could it be that it's not him either? Suddenly, a picture was drawn in the sacred fire, which was torn to pieces by the leaping flames in a blink of an eye. Melisandre's eyes flashed with excited tears. Even if it only appeared for a moment, every stroke in the painting was clear and unforgettable. Although the face of the figure in the sacred fire was blurred, the 7 small crystal towers that looked like toys beside his legs were a clear omen. The Great September of Baelor. Melisandre stood up from beside the sacred fire. Today is July 7th. The so-called promised day of the fake 7 gods, the coronation day of King Joffrey I. The High Septon of the false gods will crown the king in the Great September of Baelor. She walked out of the room, went downstairs, and joined the dense crowd on the street heading to the Great September of Baelor. The crowd moved slowly along the wide, muddy road. The scorching summer sun was high overhead, and the air was full of the smell of sweat, people, bread, and perfume. Rich or poor, people were talking about the king's coronation at this time, and Melisandre listened quietly. If you ask me, His Majesty is a really good person. He was willing to hold the coronation ceremony after so many days. His Majesty Robert must be very pleased. I think His Majesty is like Baelor the Blessed Reborn. Crowned on July 7th, how devout, may the 7 gods bless him. No matter what you say, I only care about the silver stag promised by the gold cloaks. Humph. His Majesty is rich in the 7 kingdoms, does he still lack a silver stag from you? Even if he gives everyone who comes to watch the ceremony a silver stag, what if he gives everyone a golden dragon? There are hundreds of thousands of us in total, a golden dragon. Will you give it? The crowd burst into laughter. Melisandre was covered in a red robe from head to toe. Occasionally, someone glanced at her curiously, but saw nothing, and then moved their gaze away boredly. I heard, a voice said mysteriously, His Majesty Robert was killed by the curse of the Black Wizard Bloodraven. Duke Bloodraven. I know him. The vicious wizard with 1,001 eyes, my mother used to scare me with him when I was a child. Really? He shouldn't still be alive, right? Calculating the time, he is over 100 years old. Who knows? Actually, the night the Great September spell rang, Lord Renley ran back to Storm's End with his soldiers. Think about it carefully, hee. Okay. You dare to talk about Lord Renley? According to this, do you still suspect His Majesty? His Majesty didn't accuse Lord Renley. That's right, who would suspect their relatives first? Even if Lord Renley went home, so what? Could it be that he will send troops to rebel and fight for the inheritance of the Iron Throne? The figure quickly squeezed to another place, and the vicinity was rarely quiet for a while, and the atmosphere was slightly strange. Melisandre had also watched the sacred fire for this matter a few days ago. There was indeed a powerful force hidden behind the death of King Robert. Bloodraven, Brynden Rivers, do you belong to the light or the darkness? The flowing crowd became active again. I heard that Bloodraven is the green seer of the children of the forest. I saw it. Those little things that His Majesty brought back from the wall are definitely not human. They have maroon skin. 3 fingers. That's not right. Bloodraven is human, the green seer of the children of the forest is definitely not him. You got it wrong. He and the children of the forest must be enemies. That's right. Someone asked worriedly, the children of the forest are real, will the others and those strange prophecies also be true? The long night, the end of the world, and everything. Bah, don't talk nonsense. Impossible. They are just assai people who are scared out of their wits and talking nonsense. The voice could not hide the trembling. We also have legends, my grandfather told similar ones. The long night thousands of years ago can't all be fake, right? So many legends and stories, the children of the forest and the last hero. It is said that in that winter that lasted for a generation, kings and slaves could only shiver and freeze into zombies, and there was only endless darkness, monsters, and ice in the world, until the last hero saved the world. What is the name of the last hero? The Assai people said that he is Azor Aha. His reincarnation will become a hero again, holding Lightbringer to stop the darkness and the end of the world, and bring a long summer that will never end. No one denied it anymore. A voice was filled with fear. This summer has lasted almost 10 years, right? People were even more silent. As everyone knows, every long summer is followed by an even longer long winter. 10 years, or even longer, of winter. Gods, will there be a new spring again? Will I still be alive to see it? Will my children be able to see it? Melisandre frowned under her red robe. Recently, there have been more and more people in the city promoting the long night and the end of the world. She could smell their scent, full of lies and deceit, definitely not devout believers of true gods or false gods. Not all of these people speaking around her were sincere. Who made them do this, and what was their purpose? The crowd stopped completely. Melisandre raised her head, and before her was the central square crowded with figures. Chapter 78. Silver Stag. The central square was easily 1,000 paces in length and width, but now one had to turn sideways to pass through the crowd, and the air seemed to be thinning. Counting the surrounding areas, there were probably hundreds of thousands of people. The allure of a silver stag was truly immense. The Red Priestess Melisandre looked up to her left, the countless houses becoming smaller and smaller, higher and higher. At the end of her vision, the Great September of Baelor stood on the highest point of Visanyas Hill. 2,000 or 3,000 more steps and she would be there. She tightened her red robe and continued to move slowly towards the Great September of Baelor. But the edge of the central square was lined with 2 rows of dense gold-cloaked guards, dressed in black armor, their sharp spears pointing diagonally at the crowd in the square. A voice in the crowd was very dissatisfied. His Majesty has already allowed everyone to watch the ceremony. Are the gold cloaks going to stop us? Everyone be honest. An officer took off his helmet, revealing a young and unruly face. Where are your eyes looking? Can't you see the long table in the middle of the square? There are people there rewarding you with silver stags. Come back then. If there is empty space in front, you will naturally be let through. Silver stags, what delicious bait. The crowd retreated like a tide. Before leaving, Melisandre looked back. On the back of the officer's gold cloak was a black sea monster. Although the color was reversed, she recognized the sigil, the Greyjoys of the Iron Islands. So many silver stags. People couldn't help but exclaim. There was indeed a large long table in the center of the square, with dozens of people sitting inside holding crystal black balls in their hands, and dozens of boxes full of silver stags were placed brightly on the table. Her gaze immediately fixed on those black balls. Dragon glass full of power. The black-haired officer next to him patiently persuaded again and again, line up, come one by one, answer a few questions from the recorder, do a few actions according to the instructions, and then everyone can get a silver stag. The newcomers looked at the recorder sitting behind the long table. These people were busy asking questions, raising black balls, and handing out silver stags, but the line did not get shorter at all, and even became longer and longer. People quickly joined the line. Finally, it was Melisandre's turn. She sat down on the side of the long table, lifted her hood to reveal her exquisite face, and the people nearby couldn't help but glance over here again and again. But the young recorder draped in white cloth in front of her seemed to be blind, without any ripples. Melisandre smelled a familiar aura. The so-called recorder must be someone's devout believer. it must be. The recorder began to ask questions, his tone calm to the point of being somewhat deathly. Name? Surname? Melisandre, no surname. She seemed to see the dragon glass ball flickering. Age? She curved the corners of her mouth, 18 years old. Where were you born? Where did you grow up? Who are your family members? Assai is my hometown, I have no family. Occupation? Wealth? Faith? My only joy is to awaken his lambs for the Lord of Light, worldly wealth is meaningless to me. She stared intently at the recorder's eyes, still unable to see a trace of fluctuation. Wasn't he a devout believer? Why isn't he angry? Could it be that he also believes in the Lord of Light? Are you sure there are no omissions or errors? These records will accompany you throughout your life. Under the Iron Throne, in the 7 kingdoms of Westeros, under the light, you are this person in the record, unchangeable. Everything I have said is true. Straighten your body, restrain your expression, don't move. The recorder raised the dragon glass ball. In an instant, Melisandre truly felt an invisible, mysterious power. Real magic. Not the power of the Lord of Light, nor like the claws of the others. What was that? Maintain your state, sit to the left of the seat. Sit to the right. Melisandre knew that she had been recorded by the dragon glass ball. At least 3 pictures. Clang clang. The shiny silver stag rolled on the wooden table. Here's your silver stag. There was finally some emotion in the recorder's voice. God bless the world, may the light be eternal. She trembled almost all over. Light, eternal. King Joffrey believes in the Lord of Light. She immediately rushed to the Great September of Baelor, hoping to confirm this most perfect result as soon as possible. But the gold-cloaked guards at the edge of the square were still vigilant. The only passage they left open was guarded by a knight, wearing a gorgeous suit of porcelain glaze armor, with countless flowers carved on the armor, and even the helmet was full of blooming roses. She knew him. The Knight of Flowers also had a dragon glass ball in his hand, and everyone who came forward had to be illuminated by the dragon glass ball. Many people were still not allowed to pass, and only a very small number were allowed to pass. The blocked crowd was quite angry. Why don't you let us through? What can we see here? An officer walked over. What kind of talk is that? Can't you see the Great September? Everyone was confused. What kind of sense is this? The Great September of Baelor is so big, so high, who can't see it? The officer only said, that's enough. The officer turned around and returned to the team, leaving the puzzled people to wonder on their own. Someone muttered in a low voice, I bet, it must be an idea thought up by the old men, they don't want to be with us people. Melisandre stepped forward to try. The Knight of Flowers glanced at her, take off your hood, stand still. She silently complied. The Knight of Flowers cast a slightly surprised look, then restrained all emotions and skillfully raised the dragon glass ball. Melisandre, priestess of Assai, 18 years old, allowed to pass, he said. She put her hood back on and walked forward, appearing very calm. But, what a magical power this was! The Knight of Flowers could know the appearance and name of countless people with just a dragon glass ball, even effortlessly. Melisandre tried her best not to compare the vague omens of the holy fire with this power. Boom! The noise behind her suddenly erupted, from far to near, like a tsunami that suddenly arrived. She immediately turned to the central square, and together with countless people, used her eyes to call for the Master of King's Landing, the King of the 7 Kingdoms of Westeros, Joffrey I. The sea of hundreds of thousands of people parted and retreated to both sides, leaving a passage at the bottom of the sea. Long live His Majesty! God bless, His Majesty will surely be victorious in every battle. Long live Baratheon! I am willing to die for His Majesty King Joffrey I. Amidst the endless cheers and blessings, the prince on the white horse finally appeared before her eyes, closer and closer. He raised his right arm to greet the crowd, and a smile seemed to be on his blurred face. In the omnipresent noise, the crowd was boiling. Countless people stretched out their arms to him, like drowning people craving air on the surface of the water. Bold young girls rushed into the passage, stroking the strong white horse, kissing the prince's fair hands, ankles, and boots. The white horse came closer. She saw him wearing red clothes and black trousers, golden armor, dark silver robes, and a sword that was frightening. That sword was not ordinary. So hot, so bright, full of flames and light. Chapter 79. The fervent atmosphere ignited even more frenzy. People had forgotten everything, wanting only to fully experience the vivid and weighty tableau in which they found themselves. Amidst the throng of hundreds of thousands, His Majesty King Joffrey I crossed the central plaza and ascended Visenyas Hill. Gold cloaks desperately held back the surging crowd in the plaza, while others elsewhere maintained order and called for calm, though it was like trying to bail out the ocean with a spoon, at least preventing the situation from escalating beyond control. There were far fewer people on the plaza side, allowing Melisandre to stand at the very front, accompanying the prince as he moved forward. The prince's black trousers were directly in her line of sight, like a patch of clear night, adorned with silvery white, sparkling stars. She could barely make out a few of the stars: a rose, a falcon, a trout, a hunter, a flayed man. It seemed the prince had taken the sigils of all the prestigious families of the Seven Kingdoms to add some amusement to the night sky he wore. She raised her head. The prince's left breast bore the image of a rearing stag, his right breast a roaring golden lion, and upon his abdomen, a dire wolf was running wild. What a proud prince! She couldn't help but be taken aback, her steps lagging slightly behind, yet her mind was once again captivated by the prince's back. The silver cloak draped over the prince's back was covered in many simple and exquisite black and white patterns, their specific meanings unclear, yet possessing an indescribable beauty. There were black and white fish embracing each other, one pair turning clockwise, the other counterclockwise. There were triangular scythes, several different crosses of varying lengths, 4-cornered windmills, 5-pointed stars, 6-pointed stars, and the 7 stars of the September. There were octagons formed by 3 lines of varying lengths, either connected or broken. There were circles with 3 or 6 rings, some unadorned, others bearing 1, 2, 3, 6, or 9 tadpoles. There were also neat symbols and many others. The priestess couldn't help but wonder what these patterns represented. Could it be that the prince had already received divine revelation? Were these the marks bestowed upon him by the Lord of Light? But at this moment, her thoughts and body were completely blocked by the row of spears held horizontally in front of her. Watch the ceremony from here, no one is allowed past this point. The priestess looked around, and she wasn't alone. Many gorgeously dressed figures, some even embroidered with their family crests, were being held back here. But this was too far away, they hadn't even reached the circular plaza in front of the Great September. She squinted and looked upwards at an angle. The Father's Gate of the Great September of Baelor had become a shadow, the exquisite patterns on the door blending into the deep background, disappearing from view. Even the marble pulpit closer to them was only the size of a thumb. The king would be crowned at the pulpit, and at this distance, they could probably only vaguely recognize his face. However, the circular plaza was indeed empty. She could only watch, along with everyone else, as King Joffrey stepped through the Father's Gate and proceeded with the various ceremonies inside the unreachable Great September of Baelor. People continued to arrive one after another, and they were all stopped. The leading gold cloak officer had only one arm, the stump fitted with an iron hand, and even his speech was as rigid and inflexible as steel. The commander issued the order, he replied to all questions and inquiries. People finally gave up their hopes. Clearly, the truly important figures qualified to enter the Great September were already inside, and this was where they and others like them belonged. More than one person expressed obvious regret. It's too far away. If they didn't want everyone to see His Majesty's coronation, why did they call us here? I really want to know how magnificent it is inside. So, some people began to vividly describe the coronation ceremony. After entering the Father's Gate, there's the long hall of lamps, with colorful glass balls hanging overhead, like dazzling lamps, clearly visible even during the day. I bet the hall of lamps is full of people right now, one row of monks serving the Father, and one row of nuns serving the Mother. With each step His Majesty takes, the monks and nuns will pray to the 7 gods once, listening to the divine will and praying for His Majesty's blessing. After passing through the long corridor and then through 2 huge doors, you'll see the altar of the High Septon of the 7. The 7 surrounding bases are 7 feet high and 21 feet long and wide, and the statues of the 7 gods are fully 7 fathoms tall from head to toe. You have to crane your neck and look up to the sky to see the eyes of the 7 gods. At this time, the crystal light from the huge dome built of crystal, glass, and gold will reach the eyes, warm, dazzling, and majestic. People seem to truly see that scene. After that, His Majesty and the High Septon will hold a ceremony in the center of the altar to pay homage to the 7 gods. Bishops, monks, nuns, and ministers will all gather around to witness. The High Septon will pray for His Majesty, and His Majesty will announce his amicable relationship with the Church, always remembering the teachings of the 7 gods, and shepherding his people for the 7 gods. Then the High Septon will announce the will of the 7 gods and anoint His Majesty 7 times with holy oil. Finally, the person looked at the pulpit. His Majesty will be crowned by the High Septon on this pulpit, accepting the crown and scepter, and becoming one with the 7 gods. Melisandre lowered her head and remained silent. The rituals of false gods were cumbersome and devoid of true power. A young man broke through the gold cloak's defense line. "Don't block my way. I am His Majesty's loyal servant, Elren Lantel, don't you recognize me? Let me pass. I should be serving by His Majesty's side." The father's gate slowly opened. No one paid attention to the strange servant anymore. She and everyone else looked towards the gate. The voice of the High Septon wearing the 7-star crown on the pulpit was faint, completely inaudible, and in the end, she only saw him take out a bright ring. It was the crown. Melisandre observed carefully. But at this moment, the prince took the initiative to snatch the crown and place it on his own head. Was this normal? Did the person's story get it wrong? The prince's figure moved forward, gradually growing larger and brighter. What was this? With each step the prince took, his figure expanded at least twice its size and became twice as bright. After 7 steps, the prince transformed into a giant of light. The giant stood high on the hill, overlooking the entire city, with King's Landing being nothing more than a small toy castle to him, and the infinite light he emitted illuminated the world. The vast King's Landing fell completely silent. She raised her head and looked towards the sky. Higher than the crystal towers of the Great September of Baelor was the knee of the prince, as dazzling as the sun. Just like the painting in the sacred flames. It turned out that it wasn't a vague omen, but the true future. It turned out that the empty circular plaza was not a meaningless measure but simply to allow him to set foot. It turned out that the crowd gathered in the central plaza could also see the crowned king, and so clearly, so brightly, so soul-stirringly. She felt the surging power of light within the giant's body. The giant's right hand held a long sword, the sword burning with raging flames, and his left hand raised a scepter, the tip of the scepter topped with a bright and holy sun wheel. The flames burned through the clouds, distorting the sky. The sun wheel haloed out colorful, flowing auras, cleansing everyone in the entire city. A grand thunderous sound echoed through the firmament. The gods have descended with revelation, the long night is coming, and the Dark Lord, the ice god of frost, seeks to destroy the world. Do not panic, do not despair. The gods have bestowed glory, and His great power will rescue the world through our hands. Lambs, listen to the will of God. Death is not the end. He has promised 7 holy stars as a paradise for mortal souls, and we will overcome the long night and the apocalypse, bringing eternal summer to the world, and returning to eternal peace. Light eternal. Melisandre stared intently at the sword in the giant's hand. The ancient books of Asai prophesied, after the long summer, the stars will bleed, and the cold darkness will envelop the world. At this terrible moment, a warrior will draw a burning sword from the fire. That sword is Lightbringer, the red sword of heroes, and the wielder of that sword will be Azor Ahai Reborn, and he will drive away the darkness. The giant looked over here, radiating a vast, sea-like pressure. The red priestess trembled incessantly, the light and heat within her body never so abundant and restless. Her red robe turned into flames. The flames filled her body, extreme pain, extreme joy, filling her, scorching her. It was him. Azor Ahai Reborn. The one destined to bring the never-ending long summer. The Hero King. Chapter 80. Joffrey waved his hand with a smile. "Squire, come to my side." Elend complimented, "Your Majesty is truly an angel descended to earth. Even displaying such miracles is possible, so naturally, keeping a remnant of the evil dragon as a squire is no problem. Viserys, why aren't you hurrying over to serve His Majesty?" Even now, Elend couldn't help but quietly move his brand new left arm. That's right, it really grew back. It truly is a miracle. Viserys' face flushed red and then white, but his legs couldn't move an inch. He had also seen the magnificent scene of the usurper's son being crowned, and his heart was filled with despair. Could it be that even the gods favor the usurper? Of course, Joffrey understood that this was not a miracle, but a super-large magic that he had created by consuming almost all of his light magic energy, sound magic energy, and fire magic energy. It was just a projection. In general, the power was there, but it was far less impressive than people imagined. The construction of the magic empire still has a long way to go. Viserys, I spared your life, is this your attitude? Joffrey's face showed displeasure. You should know that according to my father's wishes, you should have been smashed into mud with a hammer, your head stuck on a spear and left to rot in the sunday. Do you want that? I can grant your wish. Joffrey called out to the guards outside the door, take him down and let the dungeon take good care of him. Viserys finally collapsed. No, no. He slumped to the ground powerlessly. Daenerys was saddened by her brother's plight, but in this situation, what more could she ask for? She had to survive first. Your Majesty, Daenerys said with difficulty. Brother, Viserys is just too scared, he has absolutely no intention of disrespect. I beg your Majesty to forgive his rudeness. Humph, be glad you have a good sister. For the sake of our family, I won't hold it against you. Joffrey glared at Viserys, what are you still standing there for? Pour the wine. Viserys struggled to get up and awkwardly looked around for a wine glass and jug. Only then did he realize miserably that he still wanted to live. How pathetic. Sit, everyone. Joffrey pulled Daenerys to his side. Quickly tell me about the stories over there, it must be very exciting. Joffrey was indeed very curious. The development of the matter exceeded his expectations. Elend's return was delayed by a month, but there was also an unexpected surprise. Joffrey looked at the scholar beside Elend, who was smiling respectfully. Elend described his experience vividly. The captain temporarily wanted to raise the price, and it was an unaffordable price. Sear Jorah and I had no choice but to fight them. As a result, as your Majesty can see now, we are still alive. Unfortunately, we killed too many sailors, and the ship was difficult to control. We eventually went off course and had to land in the free trade city of Tyrosh to rest. Later, Elend was still apprehensive. The despicable Golden Company absolutely gathered the most shameless scum and dregs of the world. They set their sights on us, and Sear Jorah managed to eliminate them with great difficulty. Your Majesty's most loyal servant, my left arm, was also left there. Elend looked at Joffrey with a face full of awe. Who could have imagined that your Majesty could completely restore a disability? The gods bless us, the people of the Seven Kingdoms are truly blessed. Joffrey looked at Daenerys, who seemed to recall the terrifying scene at the time. Elend nodded to the scholar beside him to express his gratitude. Of course, the reason I was able to hold on until I saw your Majesty again was also thanks to Scholar Qyburn for treating me. His medical skills have probably reached the peak of mortals. Although they cannot be compared to your Majesty at all, they are still somewhat useful to ordinary people. Qyburn stood up and knelt humbly. Today, after seeing your Majesty's divine power, I realized that what I have learned and heard is not worth mentioning at all. I beg your Majesty to let me stay in the court. Qyburn will definitely do his best to serve your Majesty. Of course, Joffrey would not refuse. Although the necromancy that Qyburn studied was just a dispensable skill, this kind of scientific spirit and exploration ability was extremely scarce. Scholar Qyburn, where is your scholar's chain? Qyburn sighed, I once did some irreparable wrong things, so the Citadel stripped me of my scholar's chain and title. That's why I wandered to the continent of Essos and mixed with the Golden Company. Now that I think about it, I really took a wrong path. If your Majesty does not abandon me, Qyburn will definitely return to the right path and benefit the people with what he has learned in his life. Joffrey smiled, you are familiar with Maester Marwyn, right? Qyburn nodded in surprise. I am planning to set up a dedicated research department to better utilize the great power bestowed by the gods. Qyburn, you can be a person in charge, and also write a letter to invite Maester Marwyn to come, no problem, right? Qyburn bowed excitedly. Thank you for your Majesty's grace. Joffrey looked at Elend and Jorah Mormont again, you have made great contributions. Elend, Jorah, what rewards do you want? Elend said respectfully, I am at your Majesty's disposal. Jorah Mormont said, I only hope that your Majesty will allow me to return to my hometown. I am not such a stingy person. Joffrey smiled and took out a dagger and several dragon crystal chips. The blade shone with a cold light, and Elend couldn't help but shrink his neck. Don't move, this is divine grace. After the surgery, Elend, Jorah, and Qyburn kept looking at the empty air. Qyburn's performance was the most fanatical and excited. The blue light curtain was enough to convey countless knowledge and information. What a great invention! How does it work? Bring Varys here. Joffrey patted Elend's shoulder. Elend, I have seen your loyalty and ability. Get along well with Varys in the future and take over this important task as soon as possible. Elend kowtowed excitedly, I will definitely live up to your majesty's trust. Joffrey walked to Yoram Mormont. In the name of the Iron Throne, Sear Yora, your reputation is completely restored from now on. The newly established department of the army is recruiting troops. You will be a colonel in the department of the army for now, recruiting and commanding 1,000 people. Don't think it's too little, these soldiers will become elites who can fight 10 enemies alone. Yora bowed to accept the order. I am willing to serve your majesty. Qyburn, Joffrey gave an encouraging look. Your first task is to research a more convenient way to use this light curtain. This is also a long-term task. If you do well, the whole world will benefit from it. I believe in your ability. Qyburn was more than happy. I will obey your majesty's will. The Hound brought Varys. Daenerys couldn't help but exclaim, and Elend and others were also shocked. Joffrey glanced at Viserys, who was shaking non-stop. Don't be afraid, at least he is still alive. As long as you are alive, there is hope, isn't it? He walked to the window. The night was dark. Duke Tywin arrived at the Red Keep this evening, just missing the coronation ceremony. Elend, you have to attend the small council meeting tomorrow too. Work hard and don't let me down. He gave Elend a meaningful look. Chapter 81. Today's small council meeting was quite unusual. The young king, the 3 regents, and all the small council members were present. Joffrey sat at one end of the long table, flanked by the Lord Commander of the King's Guard, Barristan the Bold, and the new master of the army, Sir Jaime the Kingslayer. Lord Tywin sat at the other end of the long table, flanked by the Queen Regent Cersei and the Hand of the King, Eddard. Also at the long table were the Master of Whisperers, Varys, Grand Maester Pycelle, the Master of Coin, the Imp Tyrion, the Commander of the City Watch, the Hound, and the Lord Steward, Hannah. The historian Samwell Tarly sat alone in the corner to record the meeting's contents. The Imp spoke first. Your Majesty certainly made quite a splash yesterday, it's a pity Lord Tywin wasn't able to witness it firsthand. Lord Tywin snorted, is there a need to witness it firsthand? The entire city of King's Landing is talking about it, surely no one will dare to cause trouble again. Joffrey shook his head, I think not. The greed of men cannot be completely eliminated. The Hound chuckled, at least King's Landing will be quiet for a while. There's even less to fear from enemies outside, we can no longer fail. The Kingslayer seized the opportunity to ask, this master of the army, I wonder what role it will ultimately play. It's self-explanatory. Joffrey began to draw a grand picture. In the future, the master of the army will command all land forces in the 7 kingdoms. We will not stop at Westeros, the continent of Essos and even other unknown lands will be brought under the jurisdiction of the Iron Throne. Having witnessed the Light Giant yesterday, every word of the king seemed so powerful. Grand Maester Pycelle said softly, to achieve these goals, a larger fleet is essential. I wonder if your majesty has any ideas about the selection of a master of ships. Joffrey looked at Tywin and Eddard, my lords, do you have any talents you would like to recommend? The Hand of the King, Eddard, had become increasingly silent lately, hardly interfering with anything except the duties of the hand. Please forgive me, your majesty, the north has no fleet, I am powerless. Everyone looked at Regent Tywin. Was this a simple request for opinions? Or was it a test of Lord Tywin's ambition? Was the king no longer willing to rely solely on the Lannisters? After all, in these days of getting along, no one could fail to see the king's bottomless ambition. Tywin met Joffrey's gaze calmly. In terms of ability and qualifications, the most suitable person in the 7 kingdoms is undoubtedly Lord Redwyne, but considering loyalty, I must disregard suspicion and recommend my own brother, Kevan. Lord Kevan is indeed the most suitable. Joffrey nodded slightly. Lord Tywin, Uncle Renley has returned to Storm's End, and the position of Master of Laws is vacant. Why don't you take on more work and shoulder this burden as well? Duke Tywin rose and paid his respects, as your majesty wishes. The imp sighed, Lord Renley is probably determined to cause trouble. We must prepare early, especially in terms of finance. Joffrey had someone bring up blank paper, let's deal with these matters together today. Listen to my plan, and then you, my lords, can write down the assistance you need, and see if the royal family can still afford it. The young king, who had not yet come of age, seemed to have completely forgotten his age, and behaved more diligently than King Robert. Jaime, your task is very arduous. Within a month, recruit at least 10,000 men into the army. The Kingslayer couldn't help but frown. Joffrey comforted him, rest assured, you and I will fully support you, just go ahead and do it. Tyrion, you must sort out all the royal accounts within this year, reduce expenditures, increase taxes, and have a surplus of at least 500,000 gold dragons. The imp agreed with a smile. Lord Eddard, you cannot relax either. The royal family needs your and the North's support. Please summon your vassals quickly, I will never forget your contributions. Eddard raised his head and opened his mouth. The South was indeed too complicated. He no longer wanted to be involved in these messes and only wanted to return to the peaceful and orderly Winterfell as soon as possible. But now, Bran, Jon, Sansa, and Arya were all in the Red Keep, where could he escape to? Eddard had no choice but to remind him euphemistically, Your Majesty, forgive my bluntness, the North is barren and desolate. You issued that decree before, I'm afraid. Joffrey waved his hand, that's nothing. As long as the Northern Lords are willing to send troops to fight, what does it matter if all the taxes owed before are waived? I will not be stingy. Eddard could only obey. Duke Tywin volunteered, Lannister will always be the strongest backing of the royal family. 20,000 troops have already gathered in Lannisport, and the gold of the West is at your Majesty's disposal. Joffrey applauded in admiration. Hannah pretended to be puzzled. Lord Renly's return to Storm's End doesn't necessarily mean he will cause trouble, does it? How did your Majesty know? Joffrey sighed regretfully, I also know that Uncle Renly's letters slandering my bloodline have already been sent to the Seven Kingdoms, and even the Red Keep will receive this letter tomorrow. Uncle Renly can no longer turn back. Everyone was silent. Joffrey continued to assign tasks. Hannah, you must familiarize yourself with the intelligence work of the Red Keep and King's Landing as soon as possible. Varys, your focus from now on should be on the Seven Kingdoms and the continent of Essos, paving the way for our army. Hannah and Varys respectfully accepted the orders. Sandor, the city watch of King's Landing cannot continue to be like this. You must fully train and recruit soldiers, screen out the dregs, and create an invincible guard in the shortest possible time. Grand Maester, please write a letter to the Citadel. King's Landing needs more maesters and even apprentices. The royal family will build a new research institute, and knowledge will shine. The ministers began to write down their needs. Only Barristan the Bold and Queen Mother Cersei were idle. Sear Barristan, who was responsible for protecting the king's safety, didn't care, but Queen Mother Cersei was obviously a little anxious. Joffrey immediately comforted his mother with a look, and with the majestic Duke Tywin beside her, Queen Mother Cersei finally didn't ask. Being a regent was not easy after all. She quickly realized. My son has grown up and learned not to listen. Cersei looked at her son, wearing a crown and full of vigor, and felt indescribably complicated. The ministers began to circulate each other's needs. The smile on the imp's face immediately disappeared. So much money, my lords, do you really think gold dragons grow on trees? The hound sneered, wealthy merchants have plenty of money and have committed no few crimes. Confiscate a few of their homes and we'll have everything we need. The imp did not agree, this will only undermine the confidence and security of merchants, the credibility of the royal family will plummet, and commerce will decline, which outweighs the benefits. Duke Tywin looked at Joffrey with interest. Joffrey naturally had a clever plan. My lords, don't you think that divine grace is just a free gift? Chapter 82. After 2 nights of torment, Melisandre finally received the king's summons. She had made all the preparations, determined to make the prophesied prince recognize his own mission and realize that the only true God, the Lord of Light, was the ultimate destination for all people. The servants closed the door, and she looked up, with only the prince remaining before her. Joffrey sat calmly at his desk, reviewing reports. Priestess of the Lord of Light, what brings you here? Melisandre prostrated herself devoutly. Your Majesty, I have seen you in the sacred flames. You are the prince prophesied in the ancient books of Asai, Azor Ahai Reborn, the emissary chosen by Arhillar, the Lord of Light. Everything is already destined. He has bestowed the power of the gods to resist the cold and the other. Only the Lord of Light. The 7 gods may appease the ignorant masses, but they are not true gods. Only the Lord of Light and his enemies possess true power in this world. You shall become the divine envoy of the Lord of Light, the hero who saves the world. Melisandre's persuasion was much more restrained, as she didn't know how much the prince truly understood about the Lord of Light. Joffrey closed the report, his eyes fixed on the priestess on the ground. He could confirm that the Lord of Light was a real existence, and his priests could wield true power, but he didn't know if this power could be observed. Melisandre, let me see your skills, the divine power of the Lord of Light. He took out a bag with a metallic feel, pouring out dozens of smooth gemstones, filled with intangible source energy. I hope these will help your spells. Melisandre looked at the gems on the table with excitement. What fascinating treasures! Each one was filled with power, even more powerful than the ruby around her neck. Thank you, Your Majesty. Joffrey was even more certain of his guess. Divine spells that require source energy? More like magic. Could the Lord of Light be a higher-level magician or organization? How is the miracle of resurrection achieved? Is there some kind of magic that can do this? Melisandre began to chant, not in any language he recognized. Her steps were nimble, her arms and body swaying rhythmically, her wide red robe fluttering in the wind, like a dancing flame, fervent and passionate. Joffrey watched silently, but was quite puzzled. As a song and dance, it was somewhat interesting, but was this the condition for casting spells? Melisandre had actually simplified many steps. In the past, casting spells had to look both easy and impossible to replicate, so that her image would become mysterious and powerful, in order to spread the gospel of the Lord of Light. But this time, the audience was no ordinary person, and even knew more about true power than she did, so she could only return to simplicity. At some point, flames surged out of the red robe again. She couldn't help cheering and laughing, such a powerful fire, with no tricks, the power gained only through spells and gestures. Joffrey's gaze was fixed on Melisandre's necklace. The moment the flame appeared, a sigil also emerged in the air near the ruby, injecting a force into Melisandre. The sigil was familiar and strange, like the sigil of a fire rune, but more complex. He couldn't help but lower his head and ponder. Melisandre slowly stopped dancing, her red robe completely burned away. She approached gently, breathing softly, Your Majesty, you have an immense power within you, let me serve you, and then the shadow of life will be born, it will help you complete your great cause. Joffrey looked at her face, but what appeared before him was Daenerys's face and silver hair. He also saw sigils similar to light and spirit. Shadow, Joffrey smiled. He wanted to see how much energy it would cost him. Daenerys, your Targaryen family has created so much sin. Today, you will pay it all back. Joffrey slowly unbuttoned his clothes. No. She fled around the room in terror. Please, let me go, I haven't seen red yet, people will die. She was quite good at acting. Joffrey's interest was piqued. Let you go? Not to mention whether the people of the Seven Kingdoms agree, my father's spirit in heaven would not allow it. You should lie down obediently. The two chased each other around the room full of instruments. Brother, save me. Viserys, where are you? Don't abandon me. Daenerys tried her best to cover her exposed body with her arms, her trembling voice full of fear. Joffrey responded playfully, Viserys? He is my attendant, how could he come to interfere? I've already sent him far away. Shout as much as you like. Besides, even if he is standing outside the door, do you think he would dare to come in? Daenerys glared at him angrily, suddenly staggered, and was immediately pounced on by the king behind her. No. She struggled desperately, but could not get rid of the man on top of her. Joffrey chuckled, take this. Ah! She tensed up, tears in the corners of her eyes, letting out a desperate roar. Usurper, you will not have a good end. Daenerys shook her head weakly, her cheeks flushed, her breathing becoming shorter and shorter. Joffrey propped her up and placed her on the desk. Say what you want, the only true God, the Lord of Light, has chosen me, why would I be afraid of your little curse? Melisandre finally heard the answer. No. Lord of Light, why did you choose this person? Can the other only be resisted by him? Joffrey gently stroked her neck, Dany, you can't see my jokes. The divine grace of the Lord of Light will benefit the world in the name of the gods. The others and their minions will face all believers, even if they have not yet converted to the Lord of Light. The others will be defeated. Melisandre frowned. Would the Lord of Light be willing to do this? Joffrey launched a more violent impact, don't think so much, just listen, Dany. When the others appear, and with the guidance of the priests of the Lord of Light, you will naturally convert to the Lord of Light, and you will understand how great an honor it is to serve me. Daenerys hugged the man tightly. In any case, as long as the prince himself understands. She carefully placed her teeth on the man's shoulder, and when the man didn't react any further, she bit down hard. That's something for later, at least now, don't think you can make me submit easily. The tooth marks on Joffrey's shoulder immediately healed, and Melisandre discovered another power. Don't waste your energy, the divine power of the Lord of Light is protecting me at all times. I have to admit, I really shoulder a sacred mission. Westeros will become the kingdom of heaven on earth. Melisandre decided to invite more partners to Westeros. This is the promised land. At this time, both rune energy and magical energy were sufficient, and Joffrey tried to meditate on the sigil he had just seen in the flame. There was no movement. Lord of Light, what exactly are you? Chapter 83, Blood and Fire Approaching. Afternoon. The priestess of the Lord of Light had already retreated, draped in white robes. King Joffrey I summoned a servant, adjusted his attire, and proceeded to the throne room for a council meeting with the real Daenerys. Joffrey was in good spirits. This meeting with Melisandre had been very fruitful. Her illusions alone were remarkably realistic, stimulating one's appetite. Although, like the patterns seen in the flames, the two patterns that appeared when the priestess cast her illusions remained admirable from afar but not to be trifled with. But he could sense that these two patterns must be related to the runes of light and the runes of spirit. The appearance of three types of patterns that were both familiar and strange, and all unobtainable, was no mere coincidence. An evolved version of the runes? World rules nurtured by heaven and earth? Joffrey vaguely understood that he must have witnessed the deeper source code of the world, the power of the gods, the foundation of a song of ice and fire. The existence and power of the true God, the Lord of Light, had been thoroughly verified. More importantly, the Lord of Light had not reacted in any way to the point he had stirred things up, indicating that he either did not pay attention or did not care. This was incredibly good news. Joffrey only hoped that he would value the mortal realm as late as possible. Ideally, after Westeros became a terrestrial paradise, a golden age of magic, the master of the world, the Lord of Light would then arrive belatedly. By then, even the true God would likely fall to the mortal realm and become a test subject on the Empire's path forward. Renley and the Lords of the Stormlands were the first stepping stone. The Empire would rise from this moment. Joffrey stepped into the throne room, where a crowd of courtiers had already gathered, all welcoming the king and the girl beside him with their eyes. Silver hair, violet eyes, a delicate face, clearly possessing pure Valyrian blood. Those with good information had already inquired about the truth. The new master of Whisperers, Elend Lantrule, had risen to his position because of this girl. After all, she and her brother were the last descendants of the direct line of the Targaryen family, the greatest challengers to the Baratheon throne. The king sat in the Iron Throne, which was now much more rounded and fitted him better. Many could not help but recall the fiery iron of that day, and the giant who radiated infinite light and heat during the king's coronation. I regret to inform everyone that my uncle Renley sent a letter of challenge this morning, claiming that I am not my father's son, and according to all laws, he will use swords to reclaim his rightful Iron Throne. The courtiers standing below were all dumbfounded, acting as if they had heard the arrival of the end of the world. Gods, how dare Lord Renley do this? The Seven Kingdoms will face disaster again. His Majesty Robert loved him so much, and this is how the brother repays him. Alas, why didn't we see it before? Could it be that His Majesty Robert and Duke Stannis? The ministers sitting at the council table were calmer, merely gazing at the agitated and indignant courtiers with serious expressions. The king was expressionless, contemplating the timing of completely replacing the Iron Throne. The Iron Throne could be just a chair, but it could also be seen as a symbol of kingship and rule. Replacing it would be equivalent to rejecting the legitimacy of the regime inherited from the Targaryen dynasty, tantamount to a great revolution. But what in the future would not be a revolution? Joffrey secretly arranged the steps: first defeat Renley, the Reach, and Dorne, then replace the Iron Throne, resist the others, and ascend to become an empire. By then, the throne beneath him would not be the Targaryen throne, nor the Baratheon throne, but an imperial throne belonging solely to himself, and no one could question it. After a long period of uproar, it finally gradually subsided. The Master of Coin, Littlefinger, shook his head and sneered, "Lord Renley is truly out of luck. If he had left a few days later and witnessed His Majesty's coronation and the blessings received, he would not have written these ridiculous slanders. Would the gods favour bastards?" Loras below could not help but feel confused. Was Lord Renley merely finding an excuse, or did he truly believe this? The people nodded in agreement, their eyes constantly looking forward. The three regents all had gloomy faces, and no one could tell that two of them already knew the answer. Only hand of the King Eddard was internally chaotic. He did not know if he should be suspicious. Joffrey was not Robert's son? What a terrible hypothesis. If so, many things since this year would have to completely change. Marriage alliances, Bloodraven, miracles, wars, hand of the King John, the deaths of Stannis and Robert. The vortex was too dark, and Eddard could no longer see clearly. Who harmed Robert? Putting aside all honor and emotion, not only Bloodraven, Joffrey, and Renley, but almost anyone could have harmed King Robert. Looking at the current situation, what kind of chaos had Robert's death created? Renley was about to approach the Iron Throne with blood and fire. Regardless of victory or defeat, how many would die because of this, and how many would be promoted? The only thing Eddard could do was protect his eldest son. Robb must stay in Winterfell. The south was not suitable for him, not suitable for any proud northerner. Regent Tywin said sternly, "Thanks to Lord Eddard's timely message, the North, the Riverlands and the Vale have accepted the royal call to arms. The 20,000 elite troops of Lannisport are already ready for battle, and more are gathering." The Hound said, "The King's Landing City Watch has already begun to expand. The young men will be bathed in divine grace, fighting 1 against 100. The royal fleet is on standby." Queen Regent Cersei said firmly, "Do they want to bully my son and me? Renly's ambition will not succeed." What thorough preparations! The atmosphere in the hall became even more solemn. Master of Whisperers Elend stood up, "The Lords of the Stormlands and the Reach, please contact your families as soon as possible. To be frank, Renly, who is destined to fail and be reviled, is not the true king. The more you contribute to him, the more tragic the ending will be." The courtiers gradually became restless. Yes, who would dare say that His Majesty would fail? Crack! A gap opened in the door of the throne room. Everyone looked towards the door, where a slender man with silver hair and violet eyes walked in, leading a pure white stag. The man kept his head lowered, his steps slow, until he reached the center of the hall and knelt down on the ground, his legs weakening. Your Majesty, may the gods bless you, this white stag in the Kingswood is truly a miracle, it should be, Your Majesty's mount." The king was slightly puzzled. "A stag? Viserys Targaryen, why does it look like a dragon to me, a fire-breathing dragon?" The white stag breathed out a mouthful of flames in response, illuminating the entire throne room. Everyone's gaze pierced Viserys like sharp blades, almost driving him mad, but in the end, he humbly kowtowed and changed his words, "Your Majesty, forgive me, it is a dragon, a fire-breathing dragon, I was mistaken, it is a dragon." This Viserys was the last hope of the Targaryens? People could not help but reveal expressions of lament or mockery. The dragon family was completely finished. The king yawned lazily, "That's all for today, everyone go back and rest, don't be nervous, Uncle Renly will not see King's Landing again, unless he surrenders. Long live His Majesty." Everyone knew. Although there was no clash of swords, no armies facing each other, the war had already begun. This was war. It came too slowly at first, almost as if it did not exist, making people unable to help but complain and even look forward to it, but when it truly descended upon them, it was too violent and hurried. In any case, blood and fire were approaching. Chapter 85, The Blacksmith. Stannis's declaration of war and the royal recruitment order had spread throughout King's Landing. Some sneered, some were indifferent, some worried, some were incredulous, and some were terrified. Still others smelled a wonderful opportunity. In short, King's Landing was in turmoil. Just like every blacksmith shop on the Street of Steel, the clang of hammers never ceased from day to night, proclaiming the extraordinary nature of the day. This blacksmith shop on Visanyas Hill was the loudest. It had the most furnaces and anvils, the most blacksmiths and apprentices, and a master renowned for his exquisite craftsmanship. Although it had only been disturbed for 5 nights so far, the clanging from this shop had become a nightmare for the nearby residents. People didn't dare to imagine what it would be like in half a month or even half a year. However, Hot Pie didn't care about this at all, he only cared about his good brother. "Hey, Gendry, forget about those red-hot irons. Let's hurry up and take action. You don't know, people over there are fighting tooth and nail. If we're any later, it'll really be too late." Hot Pie was so anxious he was jumping up and down, but he couldn't even see his good brother's face, only a muscular back glistening with sweat. He was good material to be a blacksmith. But Hot Pie had better plans for his brother. Gendry still didn't put down his work. Fatty, there are so many people joining the recruitment, you're pretty confident in yourself. Hot Pie kept wiping the sweat from his forehead. The shop was noisy, and the air was even hotter, like being inside a bread oven. I have confidence in you. As for me, a baker's apprentice, they're recruiting tens of thousands of people this time, they'll definitely need a lot of cooks. Hot Pie leaned closer, looking mysterious. I've inquired. Joining the Gold Cloaks or that army department, they provide food and lodging, and after passing basic training, they even give you 7 silver stags a month. 7 silver stags. How long would it take us to earn that much money? The iron material in front of Gendry was still regularly splashing orange-red sparks. Topomot is a good man. Hot Pie glanced around quietly, making sure no one was paying attention. But even if you become a master, you'll just be a blacksmith, still having to watch the Gold Cloaks' faces. Gendry didn't say anything, continuing to swing the hammer in his hand. You saw it when His Majesty was crowned, right? What a great miracle! I can't believe you didn't have any reaction. Hot Pie shook his head in surprise. Gendry immersed the iron material in the water bucket, splashing a large amount of water and steam, which gradually subsided. That has nothing to do with us. A blacksmith's apprentice only needs to think about how to be a good blacksmith. A baker's apprentice, he looked back at Hot Pie, your bread and pies are good, they'll definitely be popular in the future. Hot Pie didn't think so. That was before. Haven't you seen it? Everything has changed. The gods bestowed divine power upon His Majesty because the long night is coming. At that time, what good is even the most delicious bread? Divine grace is priceless. Hot Pie's eyes were filled with fanaticism. His Majesty will share the gods' grace with us, and those who join the army will have the highest priority. That's divine grace. Gendry contentedly put the finished product on the shelf, then sat down next to Hot Pie to rest. How did I hear that divine grace requires people to offer a tenth of their wealth, and it's extremely rare? Did I remember wrong? Hot Pie waved his hand. That's all outdated news. Just yesterday, 100 gold cloaks were bestowed with divine grace. I saw it with my own eyes, without needing a single copper penny. Gendry pondered, then why didn't you sign up yesterday? Hot Pie chuckled. Wasn't I thinking of my good brother? If we go in together, we can take care of each other. Gendry remained unmoved. He didn't have high expectations for his life. It would be good to continue working in his master's blacksmith shop step by step, at least he wouldn't have to worry about food and drink. What more could a bastard who didn't know who his parents were ask for? Hot Pie curiously picked up an iron helmet. Hey, Gendry frowned, immediately reaching out to snatch it back. Don't touch it. Hot Pie glanced at Gendry and the bull-headed helmet in his hand, but instead laughed. Good brother, you still say you just want to be a blacksmith? Which blacksmith would specially forge a helmet for himself, and cherish it so much? Gendry retorted loudly, who says there aren't any? Many people do that, the one in front of you is one of them. Hot Pie directly grabbed Gendry's arm. Don't hesitate, even if you just come with me to take a look, just for half a day, if you don't like it, you can come back, right? For some reason, Gendry couldn't break free from the little fatty's hand. Like the previous few days, the Gold Cloak headquarters next to Cobbler's Square was crowded with recruits. Rows and rows of spears divided the camp into many squares. The newcomers all moved slowly along the safe passage in a very rational manner, heading towards the long tables in front. Hot Pie leaned in and whispered in Gendry's ear, the Gold Cloaks are on the left, the army department is on the right, where do we go? Gendry wasn't completely ignorant of these things. The so-called leader of the army department was the Kingslayer. Gendry, like many people, loathed him. Would this person's subordinates be good people? But the Gold Cloaks? Gendry had only seen them picking faults everywhere in the shop, with the aim of getting money. Hot Pie added, let's choose the Gold Cloaks, the Gold Cloaks usually have a comfortable life. The army department sounds like they're going out to fight. Of course, Stannis can't win, but people will still die. Gendry glanced at him. Don't worry, you're a cook, it won't be your turn to lose your life. Let's go to the right. Hot Pie shrugged. That's true. After waiting in line for a long time, Hot Pie took the initiative to stand behind Gendry, letting his good brother go first. Gendry stood in front of the table. The recorder wore a black sphere on his chest, just like at the coronation. The recorder seemed to recognize him. Gendry, what do you think of Stannis Baratheon's rebellion? Gendry repeated the answer of the previous person, swear to defend the throne to the death. May the gods protect us, His Majesty is the one true king. Light Eternal. What position are you inclined to? Hot Pie nudged him a few times from behind, and Gendry said, Warrior protect me, Gendry is willing to kill the enemy for His Majesty. The recorder held the black sphere and waited quietly. After a few breaths, he looked at Gendry in surprise a few times, then took out a silver square badge strung with a chain. Do you see that lord wearing a hound helmet over there? Show this to him, he is your superior. Gendry took the silver badge and walked a few steps, then stopped blankly. I'm under the hound's command? Isn't the hound the commander of the gold cloaks? Before long, Hot Pie walked over with a mournful face. What is the Security Bureau? I've never even heard of it. Chapter 86, Eyes Watching Us. Inside the King's study. Ellen Lantel, the Chief of Intelligence and Director of the Security Bureau, was reporting to His Majesty. Thanks to Your Majesty's grace. The number of little birds nesting in King's Landing has exceeded 5,000, of which more than 200 are shrewd and capable, and can be transferred to the Security Bureau as trainee security officers. Adding the newly selected 1,000 Security Bureau D-level personnel, it is enough to watch over 10,000. God blessed. Just waiting for your order, the Security Bureau will rise from the ground immediately. With no one else around, the exaggerated smile on Elend's face never disappeared for a moment, as if it were natural. Joffrey pointed to the screen on the table, didn't I tell you? If you have anything, just contact me directly through the God-given light screen, so you don't waste time. After this period of refinement, the instructions set in the God-given core have become more diverse. Users with sufficient permissions can input edited text or images into the core, and this information will be transmitted to the central hub in front of Joffrey, so as to achieve more convenient two-way communication. Joffrey has great expectations for the future. Who would want to sit up when they can lie down? Online office is so great. Ellen squeezed out 2 tears emotionally, I'm really used to it. You don't know, when I was in Pentos, I always wanted to see you again. Now that I'm finally home, Ellen just wants to be by your side all the time. Stop it. Joffrey immediately stopped the guy's performance. Don't give me this routine. Even if you flatter me with 10,000 pretty words, if you don't do a good job, I won't be soft-hearted. Yes, Your Majesty. Ellen restrained his expression slightly. I also need to ask you, where should the Security Bureau be built? Many places in the city are, not cheap. Ever since he learned about the new Security Bureau 2 days ago, Ellen had been thinking about this in his mind. There are few gold dragons left by Varys, and the Minister of Finance, Tyrion, who has only been in office for half a month, has already been called the stingy dwarf. Where does the Security Bureau's funding come from? Just for this? Joffrey shook his head and smiled. What you said just now, how many God-blessed are those people enough to watch over? Watch over? Ellen couldn't help but glanced at the transparent glass on His Majesty's table, a blank, but the scene 2 days ago seemed to be still in front of his eyes. At that time, what appeared in the glass was the figure of Loras Tyrell. The picture was as clear as watching from the side, but Loras was unaware. How powerful is God's grace? Ellen saw it clearly. At that time, Sear Loras was writing letters, one was for Renley's longing and love, and the other was for the family's exhortation and warning. Finally, an ordinary servant sent Sear Loras' letter out of the Red Keep. Afterwards, Ellen personally pushed the servant into the black cells. With this kind of artifact in hand, what do you need little birds for, what do you need scouts for? The Security Bureau will become the brightest eye of the Iron Throne. Ellen firmly repeated his number, tens of thousands. Joffrey sighed softly, let me ask you again, how many God-given have been bestowed now? Ellen was not sure, hundreds. Joffrey nodded. This is already the limit at this stage. The rune energy accumulated over the months eventually created more than 200 mages and dozens of magic props attached with information rune mirrors. After practice, each prop can produce 10 units of magic energy per day in an environment with sufficient source energy, which can be used by a dozen or 20 God-given cores. Because of this, there are only a few hundred God-blessed in King's Landing now. Ellen finally understood His Majesty's meaning. Joffrey patted Ellen on the shoulder, so, what kind of station do you need? Those 1,000 D-level personnel will directly live in the barracks, train hard, and screen them at the end of the year. Then transfer dozens of people into the security bureau, and it won't be a problem to watch over hundreds or thousands of people. Right. Ellen only felt that the security bureau of infinite glory in his heart drifted away with the wind. Your Majesty is wise. Don't be discouraged. Everything has just begun. Joffrey pointed to the box in the corner. That's the eye of the security bureau. Take it back and get familiar with it, and train some capable people. Ellen went to the box and opened it, and there were dozens of head-sized transparent glass piled inside. Ellen heard His Majesty's voice again saying, "The eye at the bottom is yours. Write the names of the security bureau personnel in it, and it will be able to see them." Ellen, don't trust anyone too much. Ellen took out the glass at the bottom. It was black. Who can escape the eyes? No one. Yes, Your Majesty. Ellen hugged the box and quietly walked out of the study, down the steps of Maegor's Holdfast, and across the heavily guarded dry moat. It wasn't until he returned to Varys's hut, no, Elend's hut, that he finally swallowed. His Majesty has changed. Half a year ago, Ellen thought this was an arrogant prince, and he was his servant and playmate. Although he was often beaten, scolded, and teased, he was content. When struggling in Pentos, Ellen thought this was a wise crown prince, and he was his arms and legs, driving in front of the king, without regrets. Now, Ellen only knows that His Majesty is an unfathomable true king, a messenger of the gods. What is his role? Perhaps it is just a chess piece on His Majesty's chessboard, to be manipulated at will, and extremely docile. Ellen dared not disobey. He carefully took out the eyes in the box one by one and placed them on the stone table in the dim hut. After hesitating for a moment, he stretched out his fingertip and tapped one of the eyes twice. A cloud of white light suddenly lit up, flashing non-stop. Ellen stared blankly for a long time. He knew that behind the white light was the real eye. They would inspect the world for the gods and His Majesty, burn away all darkness and filth, and uncover all secrets and shame. This will all start from his own hands. Ellen held his trembling right hand tightly, barely writing on the eye, "Eternal light." Ding! The white light burst, and the eye turned into something similar to the god-given light screen. Rectangular, black background with white characters and colored patterns. The royal flag, the crowned stag and the roaring golden lion, hung horizontally at the top. On the left are 8 well-known emblems, the Lords of the Seven Kingdoms and the Greyjoys of the Iron Islands. Click on the Icefield Wolf, and the history of Stark and the emblems of the major families in the north will immediately jump to the screen. On the right are densely packed names. Hundreds of God-blessed are among them, their names shining, and countless dim names. The time at the bottom is ticking, July 15th, and there are some numbers behind it. Ellen finally looked to the middle. This is a blank parchment. He wrote Loras Tyrell. The parchment rolled into a roll by itself, and then unfolded again by itself. Loras at this moment has already been drawn on the paper. The handsome man is smelling a rose. What a melancholy night. Night of the Flowers, are you still thinking about Renley? It's a pity, Renley will be defeated. Chapter 87, The Feast at Storm's End. Long live King Renley I. The people at the banquet raised their glasses again, offering loud congratulations. To victory. King Renley, wearing a golden stag crown, raised his golden cup and drank it in one gulp, then encouraged everyone with his eyes and smile, just like Duke Robert in his youth. Many lords and knights could still recall the spirited days of the past. Duke Robert won 3 victories in a single day at Summer Hall. His sincere laughter and embrace won over the vassals of the Stormlands, ultimately overthrowing the Mad King and establishing the Baratheon Stag dynasty. Now, the liege lord of the Stormlands, Robert's only surviving brother, Renley Baratheon, had also been formally crowned and anointed as the King of the Seven Kingdoms. Everyone poured the wine in their hands into their mouths, not leaving a single drop. To victory. The atmosphere of the banquet became even more lively. King Renley watched quietly from the high platform, seemingly satisfied with everything. The spacious hall of Storm's End was large enough to accommodate all the guests. Jesters and clowns were performing diligently in the middle, musicians and singers upstairs were constantly providing accompaniment for the banquet, and countless maids and servants were carrying dishes and fine wine through the seats. Everyone was laughing, for His Majesty Renley, for the banquet, and for victory. Beside him, Lord Eldon Estermont raised a toast to His Majesty Renley. "Congratulations, Your Majesty. Your marriage to Miss Marjorie will be the strongest bond of the alliance. If the Lannisters know what's good for them, they should retreat to their stone castles in the Westerlands as soon as possible and obediently give up the Iron Throne. Renley nodded and smiled. The Lord of Greenstone had brought 800 soldiers when he crossed the sea from Estermont, which was not many, but his deceased mother was his sister, so he couldn't be neglected in terms of reason or emotion. I don't think the Lannisters will give up so easily. Lord Bryce Caron retorted. Renley and the lords on the high platform all looked at the Lord of Nightsong. The Caron family was powerful and proud, with their territory located on the Dornish marches bordering Dorne. Their family was martial and good at fighting. This time, Lord Bryce Caron brought 200 knights, and 2,000 cavalry and 3,000 infantry in his territory were gathering and would arrive at Storm's End in early August. We still need to fight a few fierce battles to teach these arrogant lions a lesson before they will submit. Lord Caron waved his fist. At least at this banquet, King Joffrey on the Iron Throne could only be a Lannister lion. What the truth was? No one was sure, and not many people cared. Just listen to the call of the Liege Lord. Lord Arstan Selmy suggested, Your Majesty, perhaps there is no need to rush to shed blood. As everyone knows, half of King's Landing's bread comes from the Reach. As long as Duke Tyrell takes action, the starving people will overthrow the false king faster than our army. Renly looked at him with approval. That's a good idea. For Marjorie's sake, I believe Lady Olenna and Lord Mace will not refuse. Sir Courtenay Penrose, who was devoted to his duties, was not so optimistic. The Riverlands in the north are also rich in resources, and it should not be a problem to supply King's Landing for a period of time. I am afraid that this method will be difficult to work. That's now. Lord Caron lowered his voice a little. What if the number of mouths to feed in King's Landing doubled? People widened their eyes. What did he mean? Lord Caron continued, send some shrewd people to sneak into the Crownlands, and carefully persuade the farmers in the villages and towns to flood into King's Landing. By then. Hearing this, some people were still ignorant, some saw the trick, some were contemptuous, and some were eager to try. This may be the first drop of blood in the war. Renly sighed slightly. You can handle it. I will definitely live up to your Majesty's expectations. Lord Caron excitedly accepted the order. This was a good job. Several lords immediately looked straight at Lord Caron until Lord Caron nodded to them one by one before smiling and withdrawing their gazes. At this time, a servant presented a golden and bright roasted suckling pig, and the aroma of fat instantly filled the entire high platform. His Majesty Renly raised a knife and fork, pierced the crispy skin, and cut off a piece of steaming meat. Who else has any suggestions? As long as you speak up, this first bite will be rewarded to him. In the next moment, several people spoke at the same time. The Riverlands and the Vale are worth fighting for. Joffrey is not the true king, and Stark may also abandon the darkness and turn to the light. The Iron Islands' Greyjoy will definitely not be peaceful. Let them harass the Westerlands and the North, and turn Lannisport into ruins. Even Tywin will find it difficult to bear. Mercenary groups from Essos can be recruited. Seek support from the Iron Bank of Bravos and repay the debt with gold from the Westerlands in the future. It will definitely be enough. Dorne hates the Lannisters extremely. Renly nodded with a smile. Some of the suggestions had already been implemented, while others were inappropriate. Regardless of the effect, being willing to speak was to be one of his own. So he cut off many more pieces of roast meat and rewarded them to everyone who spoke, and there was a burst of laughter at the banquet. Your Majesty, shouldn't we be more cautious? Sir Donnell Swift, who had been silent, hesitated to speak. The news coming back from King's Landing recently has changed a lot. Giants at the coronation, divine grace, and so on. These can't be true, right? Everyone immediately slapped the table and laughed. How can you believe such words? Donnell, you're really joking. These are just tricks that children can think of. How dare you report them to His Majesty? Renly glanced at Sir Swift. This was the heir of Lord Gillian Swift, who was ill and bedridden, and behind him were 3,000 soldiers. Renly also knew that Balon Swift had become Joffrey's Kingsguard, and the Swift family may not be completely loyal. Donnell Swift smiled sheepishly, touched his head, and stopped talking. Who cares if it's true or false? Lords, in my opinion, victory on the battlefield is the most important thing, and everything else is trivial. Sir Courtenay said loudly. The Knights of the Stormlands and the Reach will crush all rebels. No one could question this. Everyone looked at His Majesty Renly with expectant eyes. Although the marriage was not yet complete, the marriage contract with Miss Marjorie Tyrell was enough to prove Highgarden's sincerity, and the two sides were already unbreakable allies. In another half-month, 20,000 troops would gather in the Stormlands, and the Reach would have 60,000 troops. At that time, King's Landing's strength would probably still be less than 10,000. Although the Redwyne twins were being held hostage in King's Landing, causing the Redwyne fleet to dare not move, the advantage on land was already enough to determine the victory. When to send troops? Renley stood up from the throne. In just a few breaths, the entire hall completely quieted down. Countless eyes looked at His Majesty the King. His Majesty announced loudly, "Break camp on August 5 and rush to Bitterbridge before September to join the Highgarden army. At that time, we will attack King's Landing directly and achieve success in one battle." Everyone raised their arms and shouted, "To victory!" A soldier entered from outside the door and whispered in His Majesty Renly's ear. His Majesty smiled, "Everyone, enjoy the banquet. Just now, the Velaryon fleet on the coast has withdrawn to the north. Long live your Majesty!" People were even more excited. This seemed to be a congratulation specially sent by the gods. Renly silently chewed on the second half of the news. The Velaryon fleet took Brienne of Tarth, the only daughter of Lord Selwyn Tarth of Evenfall Hall. Tarth Island probably won't send troops. Chapter 88, An Elf Under the Heart Tree. Sansa walked through the dense godswood, arm in arm with her fiancé, feeling that the sound of every leaf under her feet was so pleasant and sweet, as if laughing. Everything in the Red Keep almost exceeded her previous imagination. Dazzling costumes, countless delicacies, all kinds of courtiers and ladies, beautiful and gorgeous dream castles. People kept telling her with their eyes, words, and various meticulous courtesies, "You will become the Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, the mistress of the Red Keep." With each passing day, Sansa looked forward to her wedding even more. This forest is so quiet as a mirror lake, with fish swimming quietly in the water and people on the shore admiring quietly. If we could hold a wedding in such a place, it would be very beautiful, wouldn't it? Joffrey smiled slightly, "Why not? For my lovely queen, what's wrong with holding 10 or 100 more weddings? It would be perfect to have the children of the forest as our officiants, a unique wedding." Sansa pouted, "But we still have to wait a long time, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, what terrifying numbers." Joffrey wanted to get married sooner, to completely tie the Stark family to his chariot, but every expression on Lord Eddard's face these days made it clear that he would not agree to such behavior. So far, all the ministers of the Red Keep have accepted the implantation of the Grace Corps, even Duke Tywin, who could scare people to death with a glare, has followed the trend. Except for the regent and hand of the king, Eddard Stark. Are dire wolves such stubborn creatures? Joffrey could only pin his hopes on time. Hopefully, the growing changes in all aspects of King's Landing will allow Lord Eddard to recognize the situation as soon as possible. Sansa was very dissatisfied with her fiancé's absent-mindedness. Who was he thinking about? A small figure immediately jumped into her mind, Daenerys with silver hair and purple eyes. He must be thinking about that woman. Sansa glared at him angrily. Ever since she saw this former princess in the Red Keep for the first time, Sansa had a sense of inexplicable crisis and resistance, as if the two would eventually become enemies. Afterward, the snippets of information she vaguely heard deepened Sansa's suspicion. Daenerys not only has the extraordinary beauty of pure Valyrian blood, but her value is even greater. If the king marries her, he can reconcile with the nobles and people who miss Targaryen rule, and the Seven Kingdoms will be more stable. Sansa didn't know if these whispers were true or false. Was Daenerys really that important? But she couldn't directly ask her father or other adults, so she had to secretly gather information. Dress, needlework, etiquette, she was much stronger than this former princess. There was no reason to lose. Sansa glanced at her fiancé's handsome face again. In a daze, that kiss in Winterfell seemed to have just happened, making it impossible to doubt love. That's right, I am the Queen of the Seven Kingdoms. Sansa was no longer angry, and instead smiled brightly. Where is the heart tree? I can't wait to greet the officiant of the wedding. Joffrey led Sansa towards the depths of the forest. In the center of the forest, under a large oak tree with branches covered with smokeberry vines, 3 children of the forest were resting quietly, while Bran and Arya were happily playing nearby. Sansa immediately put on the air of an elder sister. "Bran, Arya, don't play too wildly, aren't you afraid of disturbing people?" Bran's smile instantly receded by more than half. Arya had always been at odds with her sister, and immediately threw acorns at Sansa, causing Sansa to dodge in a panic, and Bran laughed again. The child of the forest Leaf walked towards Joffrey and the two. "Your Majesty, Miss Sansa, please rest assured, we like these children very much, their laughter is the best gift given by life." Arya also ran over in a puff of smoke. That's right, we've been good friends for a long time, it's just that Sansa you didn't come, so you don't know anything." Bran gave Joffrey a fairly standard knight's salute. "Good day, Your Majesty." Joffrey patted Bran on the shoulder. "This kid has regained some spirit in the Red Keep, no longer entering the bodies of animals all day long to spy on secrets, and has regained his love for climbing and adventure, and has also helped to explore the layout of the Red Keep's secret passages. Bran, I originally planned to tell you in a few days, but since you are here, I might as well say it together and see what you think." Bran, Sansa, and Arya all cast curious glances. Joffrey paced slowly, sat down under the big oak tree. "I guess you all know. My dear uncle Renley has declared war on us, and in a few months, the war will break out completely." Sansa's face was full of worry, while Arya and Bran were both scared and excited. "We will definitely win," Arya said proudly. "Father won't just stand by and watch, the warriors of the north are not afraid of death, one can easily defeat 10. Joffrey agreed with a face full of approval. "Who says no? In fact, Lord Eddard's support was not as great as imagined a few months ago. So far, Robb has remained in Winterfell without moving, and only more than half of the North's main vassals have been mobilized, and the assembled forces are less than 10,000. The Riverlands, with their loose cohesion, and the Vale, with their serious isolationist ideas, were even more. According to this trend, when Renly's army gathers and heads this way, it would be a blessing if the North, Riverlands, and Vale could support 20,000 troops." Sansa also spoke to comfort him. "You are the king of the Seven Kingdoms, Renly only has his Storm's End." Joffrey certainly had confidence, but the Seven Kingdoms did not think so. The Iron Islands were eager to move, not knowing which coastline was the target, and 20,000 troops from the Reach were stationed in Old Oak, heading north along the Ocean Road, which could directly insert into the heart of the Westerlands. Casterly Rock in a week. Forced by this situation, Duke Tywin's main force had to stay put in Lannisport, only sending 10,000 cavalry to support King's Landing. While Highgarden behind Old Oak was still training new troops, the 60,000-strong Reach allied forces east of Highgarden were approaching King's Landing along the Rose Road, and it was expected that the Stormlands and Reach armies would complete their merger within 2 months. Very easy to calculate, King's Landing itself trained 20,000 new troops, plus 10,000 from the Westerlands and 20,000 from the north, for a total of 50,000. Renly then led at least 80,000 elites to attack the throne. Many lords of the Seven Kingdoms were already ready to defect. Joffrey just watched coldly. The more these people exposed themselves, the better, and the cleaner they could be cleaned up at that time. "Bran," Joffrey beckoned Bran to sit next to him. "As king, responsibility and honor require me not to retreat. I will personally go to the battlefield and fight alongside the soldiers." Bran's eyes were full of worship. Joffrey sighed. "Time waits for no one. We all have to mature immediately. War will be very busy. I plan to add a few clever attendants to my side to send letters, pass messages, and chop people when necessary. If they perform well, I will personally knight him. What do you think?" Bran immediately imagined himself at that time. A 9-year-old knight. What a great honor, no worse than any legendary knight. "Your Majesty, please be sure to take me with you." Facing Bran's bright eyes, how could Joffrey bear to refuse? "As long as your father agrees." Bran showed a big smile. He knew that as long as he kept persevering, his father would always let him win. Joffrey turned to Leaf. "There's good news." Chapter 89, News from the North. "News has arrived from Winterfell. Your 8 tribesmen safely crossed the wall, and Lady Catelyn specifically dispatched a troop of cavalry to protect them as they travel south. Barring any unforeseen circumstances, we should be able to meet them before the end of the month." Leaf couldn't help but smile upon hearing this. Including these 8 tribesmen, there are already 11 singers who have come to the south. Even if the situation in the north deteriorates further, at least the last embers of the tribe can be preserved. This is already the limit of what can be done. This is all thanks to you. If the leaders of mankind had been as broad-minded as you back then, I believe Westeros would be a better place now." Leaf reminisced about the distant past. Joffrey smiled but didn't say anything. If the children of the forest's tribes were spread throughout the entire continent, how could humans not see them as the greatest threat? Even the most prestigious leader could only yield to the general trend. Sansa's voice was always gentle, polite, and sincere. Miss Leaf, with your wisdom and the protection of the throne, the children of the forest will surely flourish as before. Leaf rubbed her small hands. I appreciate your kind words. Joffrey added, the letter from the north also mentioned the movements beyond the wall. Mance Rayder, calling himself the king beyond the wall, has gathered tens of thousands of wildlings. To escape the cold and the others further north, they may attempt to breach the wall at any time. Sansa, Bran, and Arya immediately widened their eyes. They had never heard of such a thing before. Joffrey wanted everyone present to hear this. After much thought, rather than having the men of the north travel all the way south to fight, it would be better to have them go north, reinforce the wall, and protect the home of mankind. After all, the others beyond the wall are the enemy of all life, and we must never let them cross the wall. Leaf couldn't help but worry about her own people. She could imagine the haunted forest becoming increasingly dangerous. In a few days, would the magic outside the cave still be able to stop the claws of the cold gods? Leaf. Joffrey looked into her large, gold-green eyes. Your responsibility is great. The Green Seer and dozens of singers beyond the wall are our closest and most vulnerable eyes to the wildlings and the others. How can we contact and protect them well? Leaf awaited the answer. Leaf, you must become the new Green Seer. Leaf's eyes drooped in disappointment. This answer was difficult to achieve. Green Seers were the wisest elders of the tribe, extremely rare even when the tribe was prosperous, let alone now. Joffrey wasn't just daydreaming. With the power of bloodline runes, Joffrey had already integrated the regression rune into Leaf's bloodline. Now, her talent in this area was definitely no less than Bran's. Bran in the original story could succeed, so Leaf shouldn't fail. It was time to give Bloodraven a surprise. Leaf, however, was unaware of the potential within her. Joffrey coaxed her, think of your people. They are facing the cold and monsters. Without a doubt, they need more help, the help of a Green Seer. Green Seer. Leaf thought of the old man on the weirwood throne, and the previous Green Seer of her tribe. If she had that kind of power, she would definitely be able to help more of her people. The young king was full of confidence. Leave everything to me. This time tomorrow, you will become the new Green Seer. Leaf could no longer refuse. Now, a day later, there were many more guests in the God's Wood. Qyburn from the Research Institute and 2 assistants were carefully inspecting the newly transplanted weirwood tree. Bran and Arya were quietly staying aside with their dire wolves, waiting to welcome the exciting moment soon. Leaf patiently comforted 2 tribesmen who had just learned a few words in the human language. Joffrey was chatting cordially with Duke Eddard. Your Majesty, are you really going to transfer all the troops from the north to the wall? If Sansa and Bran hadn't strongly vouched for it, Eddard would have thought it was a rumor. Joffrey chuckled lightly, that's right. Even Eddard's attitude towards sending troops south was so indifferent, let alone the other lords of the north. It's better to let these people and the others wear each other down. If Lord Eddard is willing, you can return to your homeland and command the legions in the name of Warden of the North, resisting the threat beyond the wall. Duke Tywin had already returned to Lannisport to command the army. Most of the real power in King's Landing was in the hands of the throne and loyal servants, and Eddard's role as a Lord Regent maintaining political balance was negligible. Joffrey was full of sincerity. Please speak freely. Eddard took a deep look at the young king. Who in the Red Keep, which word, was worth believing? Eddard couldn't tell, he could only choose to follow his own honor. Your Majesty. House Stark will always be loyal to the Iron Throne. Any position is for serving the country. Lord Eddard has also learned to say nice things. Joffrey turned to Sansa beside him. Sansa, please think carefully for your father, what is Lord Eddard's true wish? Stay in the Red Keep? Fight Renley? Return to the north? Sansa's lips opened and closed, constantly seeking encouragement from her fiancé's eyes. Perhaps, does Father miss Winterfell more? Joffrey looked at Duke Eddard and saw his unwavering gaze, like solid ice. It seems that this is the correct answer. Lord Eddard, do you agree? Eddard's emotions were calm. He directly handed over the hand-shaped badge symbolizing the position of Prime Minister. I am willing to guard the north for your Majesty. Joffrey took the badge and sighed alongside. The Night's Watch, the wildlings, and the children of the forest have all discovered the others. There is no need to doubt any longer, they have awakened, and they will soon turn their eyes to the south. Winter is coming. Eddard nodded solemnly. Joffrey pointed to the south. This war in the south is just a small episode. The gods have already given their will. The real disaster for mankind is in the north, beyond the wall. Your responsibility is great. The gods. Eddard lowered his eyes slightly. He was not fanatical about so-called divine grace. Apart from a few forces of flame and healing, most divine graces looked more like shackles than gifts. Immediately afterwards, the familiar hand-shaped badge reappeared in front of him, and Eddard couldn't help but look at the king's face. The young king showed a gentle smile. My prime minister. Father ran such a long way to send this to your hands, how can I take it back? I hope this badge can help with the important mission you shoulder. The badge in his palm was heavy and hard, and Eddard couldn't help but feel confused. Could it really be because the north was in crisis that he was sent back? Is there no other reason? Joffrey knew a little about Eddard's thoughts. This man from the north stubbornly sticks to his rules and has no good feelings for the politicians in the south, which probably includes himself, this impulsive and willful king. While the relationship between the two sides is still above freezing point, it is better to send this proud dire wolf back to the north. Qyburn quietly leaned over. Your Majesty, the weirwood tree is in good condition, we can begin. Joffrey took the wooden bowl from Qyburn's hand. He was very curious. Why can weirwood trees thousands of miles apart become the eyes of the green seer? Are there secrets of the old gods hidden inside? Chapter 90. The wooden bowl and spoon made of weirwood were carved inside and out with human faces. White wood, red faces, like a heart tree. The wooden bowl contained a large clump of crushed weirwood seeds. It was a dense, pale white paste, mixed with blood like dark red juice, ordinary disgusting, making one lose appetite. How did it stimulate the talent of the Green Prophet? Joffrey really couldn't figure out the answer. Leaf, the revival of the children of the forest begins from this moment, starting with you. He handed the wooden bowl to those small claws. Leaf steadily took the wooden spoon in the bowl, one spoonful at a time, very calmly, as if chewing colorless and tasteless air. Leaf knew this ritual. There were countless weirwood trees in the homeland, and every member of the tribe could easily perform this ritual, but everyone always understood that they didn't have this talent, so they never even tried it. Do I have the talent now? Leaf silently prayed to the gods in the forest and the earth, praying that the gods would make this ritual successful, so that she could see the tribesmen in her homeland again. Leaf swallowed the last mouthful of seeds. The human faces carved inside the wooden bowl had reappeared, as if they were telling her something, or as if they were blessing her. Bran and Arya opened their eyes wide, craning their necks to look at the little elf under the weirwood tree. Summer, Nymeria, and Lady, the three dire wolves, were quietly lying on the lush green grass, panting with their long tongues. Did they feel something? Even Duke Eddard, who was preoccupied, was staring straight at this side, obviously unable to ignore it. Joffrey's inner doubts were not resolved at all. From beginning to end, he didn't find any abnormal changes from Leaf or nearby. Failed? He walked to Leaf's side. How do you feel? Is the weirwood calling you? Leaf shook her head blankly. I don't feel anything, maybe I really don't have the talent of a green prophet. I'm really sorry, I disappointed you. A childish, surprised, and disappointed sigh immediately sounded not far behind him. Don't rush to give up. Joffrey separated a part of his spirit and squeezed into Leaf's body. Enter the weirwood tree and try. Leaf awkwardly turned her neck, trying to ignore the other thought in her body. All right. She closed her eyes, relaxed, and leaned against the weirwood trunk behind her, feeling every inch of its skin and flesh, every breath. It was indeed breathing. Every member of the tribe knew that the breathing of the weirwood never stopped, from the moment it was born into this world until the eternal future, it was always watching. The oldest weirwood trees had seen the past even longer than the Dawn Age, the first meeting between the first men and the tribe, the first drop of blood. They witnessed the immeasurable sea destroying the Arm of Dorne, forming fragmented stepping stone islands, but this still did not stop the first men from the east from crossing the narrow sea with horses, bronze, and leather armor in an endless stream. They witnessed the oath between the first men and the tribe. The first men obtained the plains, grasslands, mountains, and coasts, while the forests belonged to the tribe. Eventually, the first men converted to the gods in the forest and the earth. They witnessed the arrival of the long night. Endless cold and darkness swept the world, devouring all life. The tribe and the first men then united, and the heroes defeated the others. They witnessed the establishment of that blue ice wall. Ancient and powerful magic turned those ice into the nightmare of the others. What a great invention! They witnessed the Andals and the Rhoynar enter Westeros, the human kings in the south fought endlessly, and the tribe completely disappeared in the south. Finally, the first men, the Andals and the Rhoynar had the same king. The weirwood trees knew all of this. They were almost equal to those long histories. And they will continue to faithfully record the distant future, quietly, silently, without a trace of prejudice. She breathed a sigh of relief, and the leaves of the weirwood tree were immediately blown by the wind, rustling. She took a long breath, and fresh air poured into her body through countless pores on the leaves, bark, and roots, filled with vitality and the breath of life. It was really happiness. I am the weirwood tree now. She thought of this in contentment. We are. Another melody came from the trees. The human king is speaking, he is also there. Leaf gradually regained her thoughts. The king shook the leaves of the weirwood tree. All the weirwood trees are eyes. Try to think of the place you want to see, think of the time you want to see. Leaf missed her homeland. The air immediately became cold and dark, and faint sounds echoed in the cave, deep and quiet. Familiar homeland. Leaf saw as many as hundreds of tribesmen below, piously praying to the gods in the trees, with short spears and blades made of dragon crystal placed on the ground beside them. Unfamiliar homeland. At this time, the wise man with green eyes among the tribesmen raised his head, as if he saw the current self. Leaf really wanted to tell him everything, to tell him how difficult the tribe was now, how much help it needed. Unfortunately, this was just a past image. Leaf awkwardly fiddled with time. The scenes in front of her flashed by, as fast as the wings of a swift, as hazy as floating smoke, but she could still see the tribe declining little by little. I have successfully approached the present. Leaf was happy for herself, and even more sad for the tribe. Finally, a familiar face appeared in front of the tree, the one-eyed Brendan being led into the homeland by the then-self and several other tribesmen. Leaf still remembered everything that day. The old man successfully passed the ritual and became the last green prophet. The environment suddenly went dark. Leaf broke away from this weirwood tree and merged with another existence deeper in the cave. Leaf clearly felt the difference. Her roots were arranged in a special shape, just enough to accommodate a tall human. The throne of the Green Prophet. Leaf understood. She continued to swim hard in the river of time, hoping to find the last Green Prophet somewhere. She came to the end of the river. At this moment, although the Green Prophet's body was there, his soul had already delved into the vast past of the weirwood tree. Joffrey said, "Just wait here, he will come back." So, Bloodraven's soul wandered around outside, and the first thing he encountered after returning to the cave was this huge surprise. Two strange souls entered his throne. Bloodraven was about to return to his body immediately. Joffrey sent out a soothing message, "Green Prophet, don't be afraid, we had a very pleasant exchange in the Riverlands last time. How is it, did you find Bloodraven?" "It's him." Bloodraven calmed down a little, and then noticed that the other soul belonged to the children of the forest who went south. A message came from the throne to Bloodraven again, "If you can't find Bloodraven, then forget it, the land beyond the wall is too dangerous, you shouldn't waste your lives in vain, you should make plans early and return to the wall. Perhaps it's worth a try." The last Green Prophet was just about to respond, but the two people in the throne had already disappeared. He sighed leisurely and continued to sit on the silent throne. At the same moment, in the Godswood of the Red Keep, Leaf opened her eyes, revealing a pair of bright and pure green eyes. The original mixed gold had disappeared without a trace. The symbol of the Green Prophet. The three dire wolves howled in celebration at the same time. Joffrey, who had accompanied Leaf throughout the entire experience, fell into deep thought. The secrets of the old gods.